Welcome to a journey across almost unimaginable spans of time. Tonight we will travel not into the depths of the ocean, nor into the far reaches of space, but across Earth's own history, a history written not in rock alone, but in the forms of living things. As you listen, I'd love to know what moment in the story of life fascinates you most. Was it the first spark of cells, the rise of the dinosaurs, or the emergence of humans? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to continue these explorations with us, remember to subscribe so you'll never miss the next step into science's deepest mysteries. The story of evolution is the story of life itself. It begins not with us, not even with animals or plants, but with chemistry, molecules interacting in a young, unstable world. More than 4 billion years ago, Earth was a planet of fire and stone, its surface scarred by impacts from space, its oceans only beginning to form. The air was thick with gases we would not recognize: methane, ammonia, carbon dioxide. There was no oxygen to breathe, no forest to sway, no creatures to stir. Yet within this alien setting, something began that would change the planet forever. Molecules learned to copy themselves. We do not know exactly how life began. There are theories debated fiercely even today. Some scientists argue that life arose in shallow pools, where cycles of drying and wetting concentrated molecules until they formed complex chains. Others look to the ocean's depths, to hydrothermal vents, where minerals catalyzed reactions that assembled primitive cells. Still others wonder if life came from beyond Earth itself, carried by comets or meteorites that delivered both water and organic matter. Whatever the path, at some point chemistry crossed a threshold into biology. Molecules combined into structures capable of storing information, copying themselves, and evolving. This may have been RNA, a molecule simpler than DNA but capable of acting as both template and catalyst. From these beginnings, the first cells emerged, tiny compartments where reactions could be protected, nourished, and refined. The stage was set for 4 billion years of transformation. These earlier cells were simple, yet they were revolutionary. They lived without oxygen, drawing energy from chemicals in their environment. Some fermented, others harvested energy from sunlight using primitive pigments. Slowly, they diversified, competing, cooperating, and multiplying. Life's first chapters were microbial, invisible to us now, but crucial. For nearly 2 billion years, there were no animals, no plants, only bacteria and their kin. It is humbling to realize that life's most enduring form is not the dinosaur or the human, but the microbe. Then, one of the most profound transformations in Earth's history occurred: the rise of photosynthesis. Certain bacteria learned to split water molecules using sunlight, releasing oxygen as waste. At first, this oxygen poisoned other organisms, reacting with metals and gases, changing the chemistry of the planet. But gradually it accumulated, filling the atmosphere. This great oxidation event, more than 2 billion years ago, reshaped Earth forever. Oxygen allowed new forms of metabolism, far more efficient than before. It also created the ozone layer, shielding the surface from radiation and allowing life to expand into new environments. With oxygen came new complexity. Cells evolved internal compartments, storing DNA in nuclei, controlling energy in mitochondria. These were the first eukaryotes, ancestors of plants, animals, fungi, and countless protists. Unlike bacteria, they could grow larger, form networks, and develop specialized structures. Their appearance was another threshold opening the door to multicellularity. Multicellularity seems obvious to us now, but it was an extraordinary innovation. For billions of years, life had been single-celled. To live as a colony meant coordination, communication, sacrifice. Some cells gave up reproduction to serve others, forming tissues. Some specialized in movement, others in feeding, others in protection. Together, they created organisms that were more than the sum of their parts. The earliest fossils of multicellular life are soft impressions of algae, dating back over 1 billion years. These simple colonies laid the foundation for all complex life to come. The Cambrian explosion around 541 million years ago was the moment when complexity burst into diversity. In the span of a few tens of millions of years, Earth's seas filled with forms never seen before: trilobites with armored shells, worms with teeth, predators with eyes. Almost every major group of animals appeared in this window, experimenting with body plans that still define life today. Fossils from places like the Burgess Shale in Canada preserve these creatures in exquisite detail, showing us claws, antennae, and spines frozen for 500 million years. To imagine these seas is to imagine a world newly alive with movement and predation. Why did this explosion occur? Scientists debate. Perhaps rising oxygen levels allowed larger, more active bodies. Perhaps ecological competition drove arms races of defense and attack. Perhaps genetic innovations, like the development of Hox genes, unlocked new possibilities for building bodies. Whatever the cause, the Cambrian marks the beginning of animal life as we know it. From that point onward, Earth's surface was never the same. Life radiated into every niche. Corals built reefs, fish patrolled waters, plants crept onto land. Each step transformed the planet itself. Plants released oxygen, cooled climate, and stabilized soils. Animals reshaped landscapes, pollinating, grazing, burrowing. Evolution is not a story of life adapting to Earth alone. It is a story of Earth adapting to life. The two are inseparable, partners in transformation. But evolution is not steady progress. It is punctuated by catastrophe. 5 times in the last 500 million years, mass extinctions swept the planet, erasing vast portions of diversity. The Ordovician extinction, the Devonian crises, the Permian collapse, the Triassic losses, the Cretaceous event that ended the dinosaurs, each reset the stage, clearing room for new players. After the Permian, the most severe, more than 90% of species were gone. Yet from that devastation arose the ancestors of modern reptiles, mammals, and more. Extinction, as brutal as it is, has always been part of evolution's engine. In this way, evolution is both creative and destructive. It shapes and erases, builds and dismantles. It is not directed, not purposeful, but responsive. A process of trial and error, filtered by survival and reproduction. Over billions of years, this blind mechanism has produced forms of staggering beauty and complexity. Wings, eyes, brains, all are products of small changes compounded through time. And finally, it produced us. Humans are latecomers, appearing only in the last few million years. Our lineage split from apes, evolved upright walking, tool use, language, and culture. We are unique in our ability to reflect on evolution itself, to look backward across billions of years and trace the path to ourselves. Yet we are also continuous with all that came before, bound to microbes by shared molecules, to fish by fins turned limbs, to primates by DNA. The story of evolution is not a ladder, but a tree branching endlessly. We are one twig, one moment, one experiment among many. To know this is to feel both humility and wonder. And so, as we begin this series, remember, what we call evolution is not an abstract theory, but the living history of our world. It is written in fossils, in genomes, in the very air we breathe. It is the story of how Earth became alive and how life transformed Earth. Tonight we start at the beginning, but the journey will take us across eons. To understand how life transformed Earth, we must spend time in the earliest, most mysterious chapter, the billion years when only microbes ruled the planet. It is tempting to hurry past this era, to leap to the Cambrian seas or the rise of dinosaurs. Yet it was here, in this hidden expanse of time, that the foundations of all biology were set. Without these invisible pioneers, there would be no forests, no animals, no humans. Imagine Earth 4 billion years ago. The planet had cooled from its violent infancy, when asteroids bombarded its surface and oceans boiled away under heat. Volcanic activity still raged, continents were not yet formed as we know them, and the seas were young and unstable. The atmosphere was alien, rich in methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, but devoid of oxygen. Lightning flashed often. Hydrothermal vents gushed hot, mineral-rich water. In this crucible, chemistry danced. Somewhere, perhaps in shallow tidal pools or at the edges of vents, simple molecules assembled into chains. Fatty acids formed membranes, enclosing reactions. RNA molecules copied themselves imperfectly, introducing variation. Out of chance and repetition, the first cells arose. They were simple, prokaryotes, lacking nuclei or organelles, but they were alive. They could take in energy, copy their structures, and leave descendants. For millions of years, these earliest cells were alone. There were no predators, no competition beyond chemistry. Their survival was precarious, but they persisted. Some harvested energy from sunlight, using pigments to capture photons. Others consumed chemicals from vents or sediments. Slowly, they spread across the oceans, coating surfaces in microbial mats. The Earth became a microbial planet. These mats were extraordinary. At first glance, they were slimy films on rock, but within them, layers of life stacked by function. Surface cells capturing light, deeper cells metabolizing waste, still deeper ones surviving in anoxic conditions. They were miniature ecosystems, self-sustaining worlds. Fossilized remnants of these mats, called stromatolites, can still be found in rocks more than 3.5 billion years old, and even today in parts of Australia. They are silent witnesses of life's earliest communities. One of the most revolutionary microbial innovations was photosynthesis. At first, it was anoxygenic, using hydrogen sulfide or other compounds instead of water. But then came a lineage of bacteria that learned to split water molecules with sunlight. This was cyanobacteria, the architects of the great oxidation event. By releasing oxygen as waste, they poisoned the world of other microbes, but opened a door to new chemistry. The seas rusted as oxygen reacted with dissolved iron, staining sediments red. Over time, oxygen leaked into the atmosphere, creating the first breathable air. This transformation was slow but profound. It changed Earth's chemistry, climate, and biology. Oxygen allowed organisms to extract far more energy from food, fueling larger and more complex cells. It created the ozone layer, protecting the surface from radiation and making land habitable. It turned Earth from an anoxic world of microbes into the stage for plants and animals. Without cyanobacteria, none of what followed would have been possible. Microbes also invented symbiosis. About 2 billion years ago, a remarkable merger occurred. One cell engulfed another, but instead of digesting it, the two formed a partnership. The engulfed cell became the mitochondrion, providing energy. Later, another merger added chloroplasts, turning some cells into algae. These events created eukaryotes, cells with nuclei, organelles, and complexity far beyond prokaryotes. It was not conquest, but cooperation that made higher life possible. The emergence of eukaryotes was a threshold moment. With internal organization, they could grow larger, store more DNA, and evolve new functions. Some remained single-celled protists, still abundant today. Others laid the groundwork for multicellular life. But for a long time, Earth remained a microbial world. For nearly 2 billion years after life's origin, nothing more complex than single-celled algae drifted in the seas. This long wait reminds us complexity is not inevitable. It is a rare accident nurtured by chance. Even so, microbial life transformed the planet. Bacteria cycled nitrogen, fixing it into usable forms. Archaea metabolized methane, influencing climate. Microbes weathered rocks, creating soils. They formed mats that stabilized sediments, altered coastlines, and shaped ecosystems. Earth's surface, atmosphere, and chemistry were all rewritten by invisible organisms. Evolution at this scale is not measured in predators or forests, but in chemical signatures written into stone. The fossil record of this time is sparse but telling. Stromatolites testify to microbial mats. Microfossils, tiny spheres or filaments preserved in ancient rocks, suggest diverse forms. Isotopic signatures, ratios of carbon, sulfur, and nitrogen, reveal metabolic processes long vanished. Together they paint a picture of a world alive yet alien, a world ruled by chemistry more than anatomy. Life's story in this era was not without crisis. The great oxidation itself triggered upheaval. Methane, a potent greenhouse gas, was destroyed by oxygen cooling the planet. Around 2.4 billion years ago, Earth entered a global glaciation. The snowball Earth hypothesis suggests that ice may have covered even equatorial oceans. How life survived remains debated. Perhaps refugees near vents or thin equatorial melts sheltered microbes. Whatever the case, life endured, adapted, and continued. These microbial ages are easy to overlook because they lack the drama of dinosaurs or mammoths. But they are the foundation of everything. Every breath we take is thanks to cyanobacteria. Every cell in our bodies contains mitochondria. relics of ancient symbiosis. Our very DNA owes its complexity to eukaryotic ancestors. When we think of evolution, we often picture animals, but for most of history, evolution's canvas was microbial, and its brushstrokes were chemical. The patience of this period is astonishing. From the origin of life to the rise of multicellularity was more than 3 billion years, 3/4 of Earth's history. Evolution is not a race, but a drift, shaped by contingency, constrained by environment, unleashed only rarely into novelty. When complexity finally bloomed, it did so on a foundation laid by microbes in silence. In the next step of our journey, we will move forward into that bloom. We will watch as eukaryotes, long quiet in the seas, began to experiment with multicellularity, cooperation, and complexity. We will see how single cells became tissues, how algae became forests, how worms became animals. The age of microbes was vast, but it was only the prologue. Evolution's next act would transform Earth again, this time with bodies large enough to leave fossils we can hold in our hands. For more than 3 billion years, Earth was a planet of microbes. They painted the seas with mats of green and red, exhaled oxygen into the atmosphere, and patiently carved the chemical foundations of our world. Yet life remained small. The greatest organism might be little more than a thin film on stone, or a drifting algal cell. To imagine this world is to imagine a planet alive, but quiet, its oceans full, but its landscapes barren, its skies empty of wings. Then, very slowly, something began to change. Cells started to cooperate. They clung to one another, divided their labor, and sacrificed individuality for the survival of the whole. Out of these experiments came multicellularity, one of the most profound innovations in life's history. The first steps toward multicellularity were modest. Single-celled organisms sometimes remained attached after division, forming colonies. Today we see this in algae like Volvox, where thousands of cells form hollow spheres that roll through water. Within these colonies, some cells handle movement, while others focus on reproduction. It is a simple division of labor, but it hints at the path toward true multicellular organisms. Fossils suggest such colonies existed nearly 2 billion years ago. At first, the advantages were simple. Being larger meant fewer predators, greater stability, and access to new environments. But soon, complexity blossomed. Cells began to specialize more deeply. Some thickened walls for protection. Others developed appendages for motion. Others internalized the role of feeding. With each new step, individuality gave way to interdependence. No cell could survive alone. The organism became greater than its parts. The earliest multicellular fossils are faint impressions in ancient rocks, soft-bodied forms preserved by chance. They are not yet animals, but clusters of cells resembling algae and simple protists. These fossils remind us that complexity began not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet, gradual steps, invisible for millions of years. The stage was being set for something larger. By 800 million years ago, oxygen levels in the atmosphere and oceans were rising again, after long periods of stagnation. With more oxygen, cells could produce more energy, supporting larger bodies. Climate, too, was in flux. Around this time, Earth entered episodes of global glaciation, the so-called snowball Earth events, when ice sheets may have covered much of the planet. For millions of years, survival was difficult. Life clung to refugees near volcanoes, hydrothermal vents, or thin cracks in the ice. Yet these crises may have spurred innovation. In the wake of snowball Earth, oxygen surged and ecosystems reorganized. Life emerged with new tools for complexity. One of the great milestones of this period was the appearance of the first animals. Genetic evidence suggests that sponges, simple filter feeders, were among the earliest. They lack nervous systems, muscles, and organs, but they embody the essence of multicellularity. Their cells form pores and channels, pumping water through their bodies to capture food. Sponges show us that animals need not be complex to succeed. They only need cooperation. Around the same time, the first true tissues appeared. Cnidarians, ancestors of jellyfish and corals, developed nerve nets and stinging cells. They pulse through oceans, capturing prey, building reefs, and laying foundations for marine ecosystems. These innovations, nerves, muscles, digestion, were seeds of later complexity. They transformed life from passive filtering to active predation. But perhaps the most striking evidence of this prelude to complexity comes from the Ediacaran period, around 635 to 541 million years ago. In rocks from Australia, Namibia, and Newfoundland, paleontologists have discovered impressions of strange, soft-bodied creatures unlike anything alive today. Some resemble fronds rooted to the seafloor, others quilt-like mats, others simple ovals. These are the Ediacaran biota, Earth's first macroscopic organisms. The Ediacaran creatures are enigmatic. Some may have been early animals, others giant single-celled organisms, still others evolutionary experiments that left no descendants. They show little evidence of mouths, guts, or mobility. Instead, many may have absorbed nutrients directly from water or microbial mats. Yet their sheer size, some reaching meters in length, marked a radical departure from microscopic life. For the first time, Earth sees hosted organisms visible without magnification. The Ediacaran biota remind us that evolution is not linear. Many of their forms disappeared at the dawn of the Cambrian, leaving no trace in modern lineages. They were evolutionary experiments, attempts at complexity that did not persist. Yet even in their extinction, they paved the way. They showed that large bodies were possible, that ecosystems could support macroscopic life. They prepared the stage for what came next. The transition from Ediacaran to Cambrian is one of the most dramatic in Earth's history. Around 541 million years ago, animal life underwent an extraordinary diversification, the Cambrian explosion. In a geological instant lasting perhaps 20 million years, almost every major group of animals appeared. Trilobites scuttled across seafloors, worms burrowed, predators with eyes and claws hunted prey. Ecosystems grew complex, with food webs, niches, and interactions we recognize today. Why did this explosion occur? Theories abound. Rising oxygen levels provided the energy needed for active, mobile bodies. Genetic innovations such as the development of Hox genes, master regulators of body plans, allowed new architectures to emerge. Ecological arms races may have driven rapid evolution, as predators and prey outpaced one another. Climate changes too may have opened new environments. Likely it was all of these together, a convergence of environment, genetics, and competition. The Cambrian explosion is preserved in remarkable fossil sites like the Burgess Shale in Canada and Chengjiang in China. These deposits capture animals in exquisite detail: soft tissues, gills, eyes, even guts. Through them, we see a world of innovation. Anomalocaris, a meter-long predator, swam with lobed fins and grasped prey with spined appendages. Hallucigenia, a worm-like creature, bristled with spines along its back. Trilobites, armored arthropods, diversified into countless forms. These creatures seem alien to us, yet they are the ancestors of modern arthropods, mollusks, chordates, and more. The Cambrian was not just an explosion of forms, but of ecosystems. For the first time, predators hunted prey, burrowers reshaped sediments, reefs formed complex habitats, energy flowed through food webs, supporting diversity. Life had moved from simplicity into intricacy. It is easy to see the Cambrian as inevitable, as the destined flowering of evolution. But it was contingent, the product of chance and circumstance. Had oxygen not risen, had genes not innovated, had climate not shifted, perhaps complexity would never have bloomed. Perhaps Earth would have remained microbial. The Cambrian reminds us that our existence rests on accidents layered across time. As the Cambrian unfolded, life expanded its grip on the planet. Fish-like chordates appeared, ancestors of all vertebrates. Early mollusks grazed on algae, arthropods scuttled, worms tunneled. The biosphere grew richer, more structured, more dynamic. By the end of the period, Earth was transformed. The microbial planet had given way to an animal planet. Yet the story was only beginning. In the next part of our journey, we will follow life as it moved from sea to land, a transition as radical as the origin of multicellularity itself. Plants and animals would colonize the continents, turning barren rock into forests and deserts into ecosystems. Earth would never look the same again. The Cambrian explosion was not a single moment, but a cascade, a series of innovations and interactions that reshaped Earth's biosphere forever. When we say explosion, we mean it in a geological sense, a burst of diversity compressed into a window of 20 or 30 million years. To us, it seems sudden, but to evolution, it was a slow unfolding, a long experiment played out in seas rich with oxygen and possibility. At the heart of this diversification were body plans, the basic blueprints of animals. In the Cambrian, nearly all the major lineages that exist today were established. Arthropods, mollusks, echinoderms, annelid worms, chordates. Each lineage explored variations, but the fundamental architectures have endured 500 million years. When we look at a crab, a snail, a sea star, or ourselves, we are seeing Cambrian innovations continued into the present. The fossil sites that capture this era are windows into its richness. The Burgess Shale, discovered in 1909 in the Canadian Rockies, is the most famous. Here, fine-grained mud preserves soft-bodied animals in remarkable detail. More than 65,000 specimens, representing over 100 species, have been studied. The diversity astonished paleontologists. Creatures with spines, claws, tentacles, and eyes, many unlike anything alive today. One of the most iconic Burgess fossils is Anomalocaris, a predator nearly a meter long. It had a circular mouth lined with plates, spined appendages for grasping, and lobed flaps for swimming. For decades, its fossils were misinterpreted, its mouth thought to be a jellyfish, its appendages mistaken for shrimp. Only later did scientists piece together the whole animal, revealing a formidable hunter. Anomalocaris symbolizes the strangeness of the Cambrian, where evolutionary experiments produced forms both alien and familiar. Another is Hallucigenia, so named because its anatomy seemed hallucinatory. At first reconstructed upside down, with spines as legs and legs as tentacles, it baffled researchers. Later work showed it was an early relative of velvet worms, its spines defensive, its soft legs used for walking. Hallucigenia reminds us how foreign Cambrian life appears, and how our interpretations are shaped by our assumptions. Trilobites, by contrast, are more familiar. These armored arthropods flourished for 270 million years, diversifying into thousands of species. Their segmented bodies, compound eyes, and hard shells made them resilient. They burrowed, swam, grazed, and scavenged. Trilobites are so abundant in the fossil record that they serve as index fossils, markers of geological time. They represent the success of Cambrian innovations carried forward. Even stranger forms populate the record. Opabinia had 5 eyes and a flexible proboscis tipped with claws. Wiwaxia was covered in scales and spines, its body armored against predators. Morella had delicate spines and antennae, its role in ecosystems still debated. These creatures may seem bizarre, but they are part of evolution's experimentation. Some lineages failed, leaving no descendants. Others seeded branches that continue today. Among the most significant Cambrian innovations were eyes. Complex vision evolved in this period, allowing predators to hunt and prey to evade. Trilobites had compound eyes with lenses of calcite, remarkably sophisticated. Eyes transformed ecosystems, fueling arms races of defense and attack. Spines, shells, burrows, and camouflage all became more important when vision entered the equation. Evolution accelerated in response to sight. Another was predation itself. Before the Cambrian, most organisms were passive, filter feeders, grazers, or absorbers. The Cambrian introduced active hunters with claws, jaws, and speed. This shift changed everything. Burrowing became widespread as animals sought refuge. Shells thickened, behavior diversified. The predator-prey dynamic we take for granted today was born in Cambrian seas. Perhaps the most profound innovation of the Cambrian was the chordate body plan. Chordates are animals with a notochord, a flexible rod that supports the body, and a dorsal nerve cord. Early chordates, like Pikaia from the Burgess Shale, were small, fish-like creatures. They swam with undulating bodies, filtering food from water. Though humble, they were ancestors of all vertebrates: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. From these delicate fossils began the lineage that would one day walk on land and gaze at the stars. The Cambrian explosion raises questions still debated today. Why then? Why not earlier or later? Oxygen levels had risen before, yet complexity lagged. Genetic innovations may have unlocked possibilities, but why all at once? Some suggest that ecological thresholds had to be crossed, enough diversity of prey and predators, enough interactions to spark feedback loops. Evolution in this view is not just about genes or environment, but about ecosystems reaching critical mass. Once diversity passed a tipping point, it accelerated explosively. It is also worth remembering that the Cambrian was not a single explosion everywhere. In some regions, diversity rose earlier, in others later. Fossil sites in China, Greenland, and elsewhere reveal local variations. The explosion may reflect both genuine diversification and the sudden appearance of fossils thanks to hard parts like shells. Life may have been diversifying invisibly for millions of years before it became visible in stone. Regardless, the Cambrian set the template for the rest of Earth's history. Body plans stabilized, ecosystems complexified, the biosphere grew dynamic. The microbial world had given rise to an animal world, one that would spread into every environment. The aftermath of the Cambrian saw continued innovation. During the Ordovician period, diversity increased further, reefs expanded, and the first vertebrates with jaws appeared. Plants began colonizing land, bringing green to barren continents. Each step extended life's reach, transforming Earth itself. When we reflect on the Cambrian, we should see not just strange creatures, but the roots of our own existence. Eyes, skeletons, muscles, nerves, jaws, all trace back to this period. Evolution is not destiny, but contingency. Yet we are products of those contingencies, heirs of Cambrian seas. In the next part of our journey, we will follow life as it took its boldest step yet, the move from sea to land. Plants crept ashore, fungi broke down rock, arthropods scuttled on beaches, and eventually vertebrates followed. The colonization of land was another transformation as profound as the Cambrian explosion, reshaping Earth into the living planet we know today. The seas had birthed life, cradled it for billions of years, and filled with creatures of astonishing diversity during the Cambrian and Ordovician periods. Yet for all their richness, they were still only part of the story. The continents, vast, barren, silent, remained untouched by life. No forests swayed in the wind, no insects buzzed, no animals walked. Only rock, sand, and the endless movement of weather shaped the land. But evolution never stops experimenting. Slowly, tentatively, life began to push outward from the sea. This colonization of land was one of the greatest transformations in Earth's history. It reshaped landscapes, altered the atmosphere, and set the stage for entire new ecosystems. Without it, Earth would be a water world of fish and corals. With it, forests, deserts, grasslands, and mountains teeming with life became possible. The first pioneers were likely microbes and fungi. Long before visible plants or animals appeared, microbial mats clung to moist rocks near shorelines. Fungi, with their talent for breaking down minerals, helped weather stone into soil. Together, these organisms prepared the ground for more complex colonists. Even today, lichens, partnerships of fungi and algae, show us what those earliest terrestrial ecosystems may have looked like. Thin, crusty films spreading across bare rock, fragile yet persistent. Then, around 470 million years ago, the first plants made their appearance. They were not trees or flowers, but simple moss-like organisms. Small and low to the ground, they had no roots, no wood, no seeds. They relied on water films to reproduce, their spores drifting only short distances. But even these humble pioneers began to transform Earth. By anchoring to rock and drawing nutrients, they created patches of green where none had been before. They trapped sediments, stabilized soils, and began cycling carbon on land. Over millions of years, plants grew more complex. They developed vascular tissue, specialized cells that transported water and nutrients through their bodies. This innovation allowed them to grow taller, to spread inland, and to survive in drier environments. Roots evolved, anchoring plants more firmly and reaching deeper into soil. Leaves expanded surface area, capturing more sunlight. Each step increased productivity, turning bare rock into fertile landscapes. By the Devonian period, around 400 million years ago, Earth's continents were changing visibly. Vast forests of primitive plants, some resembling ferns and horsetails, covered lowlands and riverbanks. Trees like Archaeopteris grew to towering heights, their woody trunks shading wetlands. These forests altered the atmosphere profoundly. By pulling carbon dioxide from the air and releasing oxygen, they cooled the climate and enriched the air we breathe. Oxygen levels rose to levels higher than today, supporting giant insects and amphibians. The greening of the continents was as profound a revolution as the Cambrian explosion had been in the seas. But plants did not colonize land alone. Fungi formed crucial partnerships with their roots, extending networks into soil to gather water and minerals. These mycorrhizal relationships persist today, underpinning almost all modern ecosystems. In exchange for sugars from plants, fungi provided nutrients, allowing forests to thrive where they otherwise could not. It was cooperation, not competition, that made land colonization possible. Animals followed soon after. The first were arthropods, descendants of trilobite-like ancestors, that crawled onto beaches in search of food. Fossil trackways show centipede-like creatures scuttling across ancient mudflats. Millipedes and early insects appeared, feeding on decaying plant matter. Scorpions too emerged among the earliest predators on land. With them came the first terrestrial food webs, primitive but real. The move to land was fraught with challenges. Water buoyed bodies in the sea, but on land gravity demanded stronger skeletons. Gills dried out in air, so new respiratory systems were needed. Eggs that once floated freely in water had to be protected from desiccation. Each lineage solved these problems differently. Arthropods developed exoskeletons and book lungs. Plants evolved protective spores, waxy cuticles, and eventually seeds. Amphibians, the first vertebrates to venture ashore, modified fins into limbs and lungs from swim bladders. The transition of vertebrates to land is one of the most remarkable stories in evolution. Fish with fleshy lobed fins, like Eusthenopteron and Tiktaalik, became the ancestors of tetrapods, the four-limbed animals. Tiktaalik, discovered in 2004 in Arctic Canada, shows the intermediate stage. It had both gills and lungs, both fins and primitive wrist bones. It could prop itself up in shallow water, gulp air, and perhaps haul onto mudflats. In its anatomy lies the blueprint of all later amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. By the late Devonian, true amphibians had appeared. They still relied on water for reproduction, laying eggs in ponds and rivers, but they could walk and hunt on land. Their lungs allowed them to breathe air, their limbs to move across terrain. With them, vertebrates began the conquest of the continents. This colonization reshaped Earth in every way. Rivers became bordered by forests, wetlands filled with amphibians, insects buzzed through the air, soils thickened with roots and decaying matter. Carbon dioxide plummeted as plants locked it away, while oxygen soared. These changes triggered a global cooling, perhaps even glaciation, as forests drew down greenhouse gases. Life was not merely adapting to Earth, it was transforming it. The colonization of land also set the stage for new crises. When forests spread too widely, their roots accelerated weathering of rocks, drawing carbon from the air and cooling climate. This may have contributed to mass extinctions at the end of the Devonian, when many marine species vanished. Once again, evolution's creativity was entwined with destruction. Yet through loss came new opportunities. Reptiles emerged in the Carboniferous period, with eggs that could survive on land. The amniotic egg, encased in protective membranes and shells, was a revolutionary adaptation. No longer tied to water for reproduction, reptiles could venture deeper into dry interiors. They diversified into lizards, early crocodile relatives, and ancestors of dinosaurs and mammals. The amniotic egg was as significant as lungs or limbs in Earth's story, unlocking whole continents for colonization. Meanwhile, insects diversified spectacularly. Wings evolved, granting the first true flight in Earth's history. Dragonflies with wingspans of over 2 feet soared above swamps. Cockroaches, beetles, and early termites spread across forests, feeding on plants and wood. Their abundance reshaped ecosystems, making insects the most successful group of animals on land, a title they still hold today. The Carboniferous forests were extraordinary. Towering lycophytes, horsetails, and seed ferns formed dense canopies. Swamps spread across continents, laying down the coal deposits we mine today. Amphibians thrived in wetlands, reptiles hunted along banks, and giant insects buzzed overhead. Oxygen levels soared to 30%, fueling gigantism and lush growth. It was a world both alien and familiar, shaped by evolutionary experiments that defined land life. To step back, we can see the colonization of land as another great transition, as profound as the origin of life or the Cambrian explosion. It was not inevitable. It required countless innovations: roots, leaves, lungs, limbs, eggs, wings. It was shaped by chance, by crisis, by cooperation. But once it occurred, Earth was never the same. The continents became living landscapes, ecosystems stretching from shorelines to mountains, deserts to swamps. In the next part of our journey, we will watch how these new terrestrial ecosystems evolved further. We will see the rise of reptiles, the dominance of giant amphibians, the spreading forests of the Carboniferous, and the shifts that prepared the way for dinosaurs and mammals. Evolution's canvas was growing larger and its brushstrokes bolder. The Devonian had been the age of fishes, the time when vertebrates first pushed their way onto land. The Carboniferous that followed, beginning about 359 million years ago, was something different. It was a world lush and damp, where forests of strange trees rose in swamps, where insects grew to extraordinary sizes, and where new kinds of vertebrates began to take command of the land. The Carboniferous is named for the coal seams that define it, vast deposits of compressed plant matter laid down in swampy forests. These deposits tell us something essential. Never before had Earth been so green. Never before had plants spread so widely across the continents. Lycophytes, horsetails, and seed ferns dominated. Unlike modern trees, many of these plants reproduced with spores rather than seeds, and they lacked the complex tissues of later forests. Yet they grew tall, some over 30 meters, their trunks armored with thick bark-like tissue. They crowded into dense stands, shading wetlands and rivers, building the first true terrestrial forests. These forests transformed Earth's atmosphere. By pulling in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, they altered the chemistry of the air. Oxygen levels during the Carboniferous soared, reaching as high as 30 to 35%, far above today's 21%. This surplus of oxygen allowed unusual adaptations. Insects, whose breathing is limited by diffusion through spiracles, could grow far larger than modern relatives. Dragonflies with wingspans of 70 centimeters soared above the canopy. Millipedes stretched 2 meters long, their segmented bodies crawling through undergrowth. Spiders and scorpions reached sizes that would startle us today. It was a world of giants, fueled by oxygen. In this environment, amphibians thrived. Descendants of Devonian pioneers diversified into countless forms. Some remained small, insect-eating creatures scuttling among roots. Others became massive, crocodile-like predators, lurking in swamps for prey. Amphibians were tied to water for reproduction, their eggs still fragile, but in the Carboniferous wetlands this was no limitation. They were dominant vertebrates, ruling rivers and marshes. Yet even as amphibians spread, a new kind of vertebrate was evolving that would one day eclipse them: reptiles. The key innovation was the amniotic egg. Unlike amphibian eggs, which dried out easily, the amniotic egg was enclosed in membranes and often a leathery or hard shell. It contained its own watery environment, allowing embryos to develop on land. This adaptation freed reptiles from dependency on water for reproduction. For the first time, vertebrates could colonize dry uplands, forests far from rivers, and even deserts. The earliest reptiles were small, lizard-like creatures. Their bones show sturdier limbs than amphibians, adapted for walking on land. Their skulls had different patterns of openings, leading to the main lineages of reptiles: anapsids, synapsids, and diapsids. This distinction would shape evolution for millions of years. Synapsids, with a single temporal opening in their skulls, were the ancestors of mammals. Diapsids, with 2 openings, gave rise to dinosaurs, birds, and modern reptiles. Anapsids, lacking such openings, were represented by early turtles. Even in the Carboniferous, the seeds of future lineages were already sown. While reptiles were only beginning their rise, arthropods reached their Carboniferous zenith. The giant dragonfly Meganeura dominated the skies, a skilled predator of other insects. In the swamps, the millipede-like Arthropleura stretched longer than a human, feeding on decaying plant matter. Scorpions and spiders hunted among roots, while early cockroaches spread through forests. These arthropods were the engineers of carboniferous ecosystems, breaking down plant matter, recycling nutrients, and providing prey for amphibians and reptiles. The forests themselves were unique. Lycophytes like lepidodendron grew straight and tall, their trunks covered in diamond-shaped leaf scars. Horsetails like calamites formed dense thickets. Seed ferns spread broad fronds across wetlands. The air was thick with spores carried on wind and water. These plants lacked the flowers, fruits, and true wood of later forests, but they dominated landscapes with overwhelming abundance. When they died, they fell into waterlogged swamps where decay was slow. Layers of peat built up, compressed over millions of years into coal. Today, we burn these deposits as fossil fuels, tapping into sunlight captured in the Carboniferous. The Carboniferous was not only lush, but dynamic. Sea levels rose and fell, alternately flooding forests and exposing them. This created cycles of deposition, coal seams interbedded with shales and sandstones. The shifting environments drove diversification. Some amphibians adapted to dry spells, others to aquatic life. Reptiles spread into niches left vacant by climate swings. Insects radiated into myriad forms, experimenting with wings and flight. Flight itself was a transformative adaptation. Insects were the first animals to take to the air, perhaps as early as the Devonian, but in the Carboniferous they flourished. Wings allowed them to escape predators, disperse widely, and exploit new food sources. Pollination had not yet evolved, flowering plants were still hundreds of millions of years away, but insects fed on spores, detritus, and one another. Their mastery of the air reshaped ecosystems, creating new predator-prey dynamics. By the late Carboniferous, Earth was cooling. The vast forests had drawn down carbon dioxide, reducing the greenhouse effect. Glaciations spread across Gondwana, the southern supercontinent. Sea levels fell, swamps contracted, and extinctions followed. Many giant insects and amphibians disappeared, their niches shrinking with the forests. Reptiles, better adapted to dry conditions, gained ground. Climate change was once again a crucible for evolution, favoring some lineages while extinguishing others. The transition into the Permian period marked a shift in dominance. Amphibians, once rulers of swamps, waned. Reptiles, with their amniotic eggs and sturdier bodies, spread across arid landscapes. Synapsids, in particular, rose to prominence. Some grew large, developing sprawling gaits and powerful jaws. Others remained small, insectivorous hunters. These early synapsids are often called mammal-like reptiles, though they were not true mammals. They laid the groundwork for traits we associate with mammals today, including differentiated teeth and more advanced metabolism. The Carboniferous world left a legacy we still feel. Its coal fueled the Industrial Revolution, altering human history. Its oxygen surge shaped evolution, allowing gigantism and fueling new metabolisms. Its forests created soils and stabilized landscapes, preparing continents for later ecosystems. It was a time of experimentation, of lush abundance, of transition. When we imagine those swamps with towering lycophytes, giant dragonflies, and crocodile-like amphibians, we glimpse an Earth both alien and familiar. Alien in its forms, familiar in its processes, ecosystems forming, collapsing, and reforming under the pressures of climate, competition, and chance. Evolution was writing its story with new characters, but the themes, adaptation, extinction, innovation, were the same as always. In the next part of our journey, we will move into the Permian, a time of consolidation and crisis. Reptiles and synapsids would rise, forests would decline, and Earth would face the most devastating mass extinction in its history. From that crucible, new lineages, including the ancestors of dinosaurs and mammals, would emerge to dominate the planet. The close of the Carboniferous marked the end of one world and the beginning of another. The great swamp forest that had stretched across continents, laying down the coal beds we know today, began to wither. Climate grew drier, glaciations advanced across the southern hemisphere, and sea levels fell. The Earth was entering the Permian period, a chapter that would last nearly 50 million years and end in catastrophe. It was a time of both consolidation and innovation, of ecosystems reshaping, reptiles and synapsids rising, and ultimately of the greatest extinction the planet has ever known. The continents themselves were changing. By the early Permian, most of Earth's landmasses had fused into the supercontinent Pangaea. It stretched from pole to pole, a colossal expanse of deserts, mountains, and interior plains. Surrounding it was the global ocean Panthalassa, vast and deep. This arrangement created extreme climates. Interiors of Pangaea were dry, with little moisture reaching far inland. Seasonal contrasts intensified. Coastal regions supported forests, but deserts dominated inland. The lush wetlands of the Carboniferous gave way to a harsher, more variable world. In this shifting environment, amphibians declined. Their reliance on moist habitats and water-bound reproduction left them vulnerable. Reptiles, with their amniotic eggs and scaly skin, thrived. They spread into dry interiors, filling niches unavailable to their ancestors. But within the reptiles, two lineages stood out: synapsids and diapsids. Synapsids were especially prominent in the Permian, sometimes called mammal-like reptiles. Though that term is misleading, they were the dominant land vertebrates of the time. Their skulls featured a single temporal opening behind the eye socket, allowing stronger jaw muscles. This gave them an advantage in feeding strategies, supporting both herbivores and carnivores. Over time, synapsids developed differentiated teeth, incisors, canines, molars. Unlike the uniform teeth of reptiles, this foreshadowed the mammalian lineage to come. Among the earliest synapsids were the pelycosaurs. The most famous of these is Dimetrodon, often mistaken for a dinosaur but predating them by tens of millions of years. With its sprawling gait, sharp teeth, and large sail on its back, Dimetrodon was a formidable predator. The sail, formed by elongated neural spines, may have helped regulate body temperature or attract mates. Pelycosaurs dominated early Permian ecosystems, both as carnivores and herbivores, feeding on the plants that had adapted to drier climates. As the Permian progressed, more advanced synapsids emerged, the therapsids. They developed more upright postures, more efficient metabolisms, and even hints of warm-bloodedness. Some grew fur-like coverings, though direct fossil evidence is scarce. Therapsids diversified into herbivores, insectivores, and apex predators. Gorgonopsians, for instance, were saber-toothed hunters with powerful jaws and elongated canines. Dicynodonts, by contrast, were tusked herbivores with beak-like mouths, some growing as large as hippos. Therapsids were adaptive, versatile, and widespread. They were the true rulers of the Permian. Meanwhile, diapsids, with two temporal openings in their skulls, were diversifying as well. From them would descend crocodiles, lizards, snakes, dinosaurs, and birds. In the Permian, they remained secondary players compared to synapsids, but they were establishing the lineages that would later dominate. Early archosaur relatives, for instance, were beginning to appear, though they would not rise until after the Permian. Plants too were changing. The giant lycophyte and horsetail forests of the Carboniferous had largely disappeared, replaced by seed ferns, conifers, and ginkgos. Seeds provided an evolutionary advantage in dry climates, protecting embryos and allowing plants to spread farther inland. By the late Permian, conifer forests were spreading across Pangaea, foreshadowing the flora of the Mesozoic. These forests stabilized soils, influenced climate, and provided food for herbivorous synapsids. The Permian ecosystems were dynamic, but fragile. Volcanoes erupted intermittently, altering landscapes. Climate swung between wet and dry, warm and cool. Yet life thrived in diversity, until it was tested by one of the greatest crises in Earth's history. About 252 million years ago, near the close of the Permian, the planet entered a cataclysm, known as the Permian Triassic Extinction Event, or simply the Great Dying. It was the most severe extinction known. Over 90% of marine species vanished, along with about 70% of terrestrial vertebrates. Entire ecosystems collapsed. Recovery would take tens of millions of years. What caused this catastrophe? Evidence points to massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia, known as the Siberian Traps. For hundreds of thousands of years, immense volumes of lava poured across millions of square kilometers. With the eruptions came vast amounts of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other gases. The atmosphere warmed drastically, perhaps by 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. Oceans acidified, oxygen levels plummeted, and toxic conditions spread. Methane may have been released from seafloor deposits, amplifying warming. Acid rain poisoned soils and waters. Marine ecosystems were devastated. Coral reefs, already fragile, vanished entirely, not to return for millions of years. Trilobites, survivors of earlier extinctions, disappeared forever. Brachiopods, crinoids, and ammonites declined sharply. On land, forests collapsed, herbivores dwindled, and apex predators disappeared. The world entered a biological silence unlike any before. The Great Dying was not instantaneous. It unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years, with pulses of extinction tied to volcanic phases. But its effect was profound and long-lasting. Ecosystems took tens of millions of years to recover. Diversity plummeted, leaving evolutionary bottlenecks. Many lineages that had dominated for hundreds of millions of years were erased. And yet, as always, life endured. Some therapsids survived, including small cynodonts that would eventually give rise to mammals. Some diapsids persisted, poised to radiate in the Triassic. In the seas, ancestors of modern mollusks and fish clung on. Extinction cleared ecological space, opening opportunities for survivors to diversify. From catastrophe emerged the seeds of future worlds. The Permian reminds us of evolution's duality, creativity and destruction, innovation and collapse. It shows us that life's story is not a steady march upward, but a series of rises and falls, shaped as much by catastrophe as by adaptation. The Great Dying nearly ended the story, yet it also set the stage for the rise of dinosaurs, mammals, and eventually us. When we think of the Permian, we should imagine not just strange creatures like Dimetrodon or Gorgonopsians, but a world fragile in its abundance, vulnerable to planetary shifts. Its end reminds us of life's dependence on stable climates and balanced systems. Its survivors remind us of resilience, the ability of life to endure even when nearly extinguished. In the next part of our journey, we will move into the Triassic period, the dawn after the Great Dying. Here, life would rebuild, new lineages would emerge, archosaurs would rise, and the first dinosaurs would step onto the stage. It was the beginning of a new era, one shaped by the shadows of extinction and the promise of renewal. The Permian had ended in silence. The forests had withered, the seas had emptied, and the earth had nearly lost the richness it had taken hundreds of millions of years to build. But even in devastation, life never truly ends. In the aftermath of the Great Dying, the Triassic period began. It was a time of recovery, of rebuilding, and of new experiments. For 50 million years, life stitched itself back together. From that patchwork came some of the most important innovations in Earth's history: the rise of dinosaurs, the origins of mammals, and the opening of the Mesozoic, the so-called Age of Reptiles. The early Triassic was stark. Fossil evidence suggests that ecosystems were sparse, with few species dominating. In the oceans, stromatolites, microbial mats, returned, flourishing in the absence of grazers. Once common only in Earth's earliest history, they were suddenly widespread again, a sign of how far the biosphere had collapsed. On land, recovery was slow. Forests were patchy, dominated by hardy plants like ferns and seed ferns. Animals were few, and most were small. The once mighty therapsids had been reduced to scattered survivors, clinging to niches where they could. But the Triassic was not static. It was dynamic, with evolution moving quickly to fill empty niches. In the seas, new lineages of reptiles entered the water. Ichthyosaurs, streamlined like dolphins, appeared within a few million years of the extinction. They swam with powerful tails, hunted fish and cephalopods, and grew to impressive sizes. Nothosaurs prowled shallow coasts, using paddle-like limbs to swim and sharp teeth to catch prey. These marine reptiles represented a bold evolutionary move, land animals returning to the sea, adapting to an entirely new lifestyle. On land, the survivors diversified. Therapsids, though reduced, still played important roles. Cynodonts, small, agile, and possibly warm-blooded, scurried through undergrowth. They had differentiated teeth, more advanced jaws, and some likely had whiskers or fur. These were the ancestors of mammals, though true mammals would not appear until later. For now, cynodonts were modest creatures, but they carried the spark of future greatness. Meanwhile, a new group was rising, the archosaurs. Descended from diapsids, archosaurs included ancestors of crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs. In the Triassic, they began to experiment with body forms and ecologies. Some were small, nimble predators. Others grew larger, with stronger limbs and upright postures that gave them speed and endurance. Unlike the sprawling gaits of amphibians and many reptiles, archosaurs evolved erect stances, with legs positioned beneath the body. This innovation allowed more efficient movement on land, a crucial advantage in open environments. The Triassic world itself was unusual. Pangaea still stretched across the globe unbroken. Its vast interior was arid, with deserts the size of continents. Seasonal extremes shaped ecosystems, monsoon rains in some regions, relentless drought in others. Along coasts and rivers, forests of conifers, cycads, and ginkgos grew. In the oceans, ammonites, relatives of squid with coiled shells, flourished. Life was recovering, but it looked different from what had come before. By the Middle Triassic, ecosystems were diversifying more fully. Marine reptiles expanded into niches left vacant by extinction. Reefs once dominated by sponges and corals slowly re-emerged, built by new kinds of corals and bivalves. On land, therapsids remained important herbivores and carnivores, but archosaurs were gaining ground. Some archosaurs evolved armored bodies, giving rise to early relatives of crocodiles. Others became bipedal predators, light and fast. Among these were the ancestors of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs began humbly. The earliest known forms, such as the Eiraptor and Herrerasaurus from South America, were small, lightly built, and not yet dominant. They were part of a broader radiation of archosaurs that included many competitors. For tens of millions of years, dinosaurs were just one branch among many, not yet rulers of the land, but they had traits that would later prove decisive: efficient, upright postures, fast metabolisms, and adaptability to changing environments. At the same time, the first flying vertebrates appeared, pterosaurs. With wings formed from elongated fingers and membranes of skin, they took to the skies above Triassic landscapes. Some were small insect catchers, others larger fish-eaters. They represented another bold experiment, vertebrate flight. Like insects before them, pterosaurs opened a new dimension of life, the air. By the late Triassic, ecosystems had recovered into complex dynamic systems. Forests of conifers shaded undergrowth of ferns and cycads. Herbivores browsed and grazed, predators hunted, insects buzzed. Therapsids still persisted, but archosaurs increasingly held sway. Dinosaurs were diversifying, though still modest in size. Crocodile-line archosaurs occupied many niches, from armored herbivores to sleek predators. The stage was set for competition and for another crisis. Around 201 million years ago, at the end of the Triassic, Earth faced another mass extinction. It was not as severe as the Great Dying, but it was significant. Once again, massive volcanic eruptions were involved, this time associated with the rifting of Pangaea. The Central Atlantic magmatic province released immense amounts of lava and gases as the supercontinent began to split. Carbon dioxide surged, warming the climate and acidifying oceans. Many groups of large amphibians and reptilian competitors disappeared. Archosaurs suffered losses, but dinosaurs emerged relatively unscathed. This extinction cleared ecological space. In the Jurassic that followed, dinosaurs would rise to dominance, filling niches left vacant. Mammals, descended from the small cynodonts, would persist in the shadows, biding their time. The Triassic was a crucible of recovery, innovation, and trial. Out of devastation, it birthed the lineages that would define the next 150 million years. The Triassic reminds us that evolution thrives in flux. Catastrophe clears, survivors adapt, and new forms emerge. It shows us that dinosaurs did not appear fully formed as rulers of Earth, but as small, opportunistic creatures shaped by chance. It shows us that mammals too were survivors, modest yet resilient. It shows us that flight, return to the sea, and upright postures were not inevitable, but contingent on environment and opportunity. When we picture the Triassic, we should see a world of deserts and forests, of crocodile-like reptiles stalking riverbanks, of small dinosaurs darting through undergrowth, of pterosaurs gliding overhead. It was a world in recovery, but also a world of beginnings. In the next part of our journey, we will move into the Jurassic period. Here, dinosaurs will rise to true dominance, filling forests and plains with giants. Mammals will continue their quiet evolution. Pterosaurs will flourish, and the seas were swarm with marine reptiles. It was a world of grandeur, a stage set for some of the most iconic creatures of Earth's history. The Triassic had been an age of rebuilding, a time when ecosystems cautiously reassembled themselves after catastrophe. By its close, dinosaurs had survived where many competitors had not. Archosaurs had spread into diverse niches, and mammals were quietly persisting in the shadows. With the dawn of the Jurassic period, around 201 million years ago, the stage was set for one of the most spectacular eras in Earth's history. This was the world where dinosaurs rose to true dominance, where giant reptiles filled the seas, and where the first mammals began their long journey toward greatness. The Jurassic opened in the aftermath of yet another extinction, the one that marked the end of the Triassic. Volcanic eruptions had split apart Pangaea, sending lava and gases across vast swaths of land. Climate had shifted, competitors had vanished, and the survivors faced a world of opportunity. Dinosaurs, already adapted with efficient lungs, upright postures, and fast metabolisms, seized this chance. From modest beginnings, they radiated into forms of astonishing diversity. In the early Jurassic, dinosaurs were still small to medium-sized, but within a few million years, giants appeared. Among the most extraordinary were the sauropods, long-necked, long-tailed herbivores that would become the largest land animals ever to walk the Earth. Early sauropods like Volcanodon and Barapasaurus grew to impressive sizes, feeding on the lush vegetation of Jurassic forests. By the Middle and Late Jurassic, their descendants, Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, would stretch more than 20 meters in length and weigh as much as 50 tons. Their sheer bulk reshaped ecosystems, requiring forests capable of supporting such enormous grazers. The adaptations of sauropods were remarkable. Their long necks allowed them to reach high branches or sweep across wide areas without moving their massive bodies. Their hollow bones reduced weight while maintaining strength. Their respiratory systems, with air sacs like those of modern birds, allowed efficient oxygen exchange. Their herds left vast tracts of land grazed, reshaping vegetation cycles. In their grandeur, sauropods symbolized the success of dinosaurs in exploiting niches no other animals could. But sauropods were not alone. Predators evolved alongside them, keeping pace with the giants. Among them were the theropods, bipedal, carnivorous dinosaurs that varied from small hunters to apex predators. In the early Jurassic, Dilophosaurus roamed North America, its head adorned with twin crests. By the late Jurassic, theropods like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus dominated. They hunted sauropods, stegosaurs, and other prey, their sharp teeth and powerful jaws well suited for tearing flesh. Theropods were adaptable, and their lineage would continue into the most famous predator of all, Tyrannosaurus rex, though that would come later in the Cretaceous. Other herbivores flourished as well. Stegosaurs, with their distinctive plates and tail spikes, browsed low vegetation. Their plates may have served for thermoregulation or display, while their spiked tails were formidable defenses. Ornithopods, small bipedal herbivores, scurried in herds, their agility their best protection. Dinosaurs were not a single type of creature, but a vast radiation of forms filling every available niche. Browsers and grazers, runners and armored tanks, tiny insect eaters and massive plant shredders. Above them, the skies were alive with pterosaurs. These flying reptiles had appeared in the Triassic, but in the Jurassic they flourished. Some were small, catching insects in midair. Others grew larger, soaring over coastlines in search of fish. Their wings, formed of membranes stretched over elongated fingers, gave them mastery of flight long before birds appeared. In the late Jurassic, the first true birds would evolve from small theropods, with feathers and wings adapted for powered flight. Archaeopteryx, discovered in the Solnhofen limestones of Germany, represents this transition. With feathers, claws, teeth, and a long, bony tail, it was a mosaic of reptilian and avian traits. It shows us that the boundary between groups is often blurred, that evolution works through gradual shifts rather than sudden leaps. In the seas, reptiles ruled as well. Ichthyosaurs reached peak diversity, their bodies streamlined like dolphins, their eyes enormous for hunting in dim light. Some grew to lengths of 20 meters, chasing schools of fish and squid. Plesiosaurs appeared with long necks and paddle-like limbs, gliding through waters in search of prey. Some were short-necked and powerfully built, others with impossibly long necks and small heads. These marine reptiles dominated oceans, filling roles once held by fish alone. Ammonites with their coiled shells flourished as well, becoming important components of marine food webs. Coral reefs rebuilt after earlier extinctions, creating habitats for countless organisms. Plants too were thriving. The Jurassic world was green, dominated by conifers, cycads, and ginkgos. Ferns spread across the forest floor, while tall conifers formed canopies. Flowering plants had not yet evolved, but these gymnosperm forests supported the giants of the age. Their oxygen production and carbon cycling shaped climate, while their abundance fed herbivores on land and detritivores in rivers. Jurassic landscapes were lush, humid, and dynamic, with rivers, lakes, and forests stretching across continents. Mammals also appeared during this time, though in humble forms. Descended from the cynodonts of the Triassic, they were small, often no larger than mice. They lived in the shadows, nocturnal and insectivorous, avoiding the dominance of dinosaurs. Yet they were significant. They had fur for insulation, differentiated teeth for varied diets, and possibly milk to nourish young. These traits gave them resilience, allowing them to persist quietly for over 150 million years under dinosaur rule. Their modesty belied their future importance. The Jurassic climate was generally warm, with little polar ice. High sea levels flooded continents, creating shallow seas and archipelagos. This warm, humid environment favored lush vegetation and diverse ecosystems. The breakup of Pangaea continued, with the Atlantic Ocean widening and continental drift reshaping habitats. Geography, climate, and evolution intertwined, producing a world unlike any that came before. The fossil record of the Jurassic is rich, capturing this abundance. The Morrison Formation in North America preserves herds of sauropods, tracks of predators, and entire ecosystems in stone. The Solnhofen limestones of Germany reveal delicate details of pterosaurs, fish, and archaeopteryx. Fossils from China and Africa expand the picture, showing the global scope of Jurassic life. Through these windows, we glimpse the majesty of an age defined by giants, flyers, and swimmers, each perfectly adapted to its role. The Jurassic reminds us that evolution is not only about survival, but about expansion. Dinosaurs did not simply persist, they flourished, filling niches in land, sea, and air. Mammals did not vanish, they adapted to smallness, preparing for future opportunities. Pterosaurs soared, ichthyosaurs swam, conifers grew tall. The planet was alive with grandeur, and yet, even in this time of abundance, change was constant. Ecosystems were dynamic, predators and prey locked in arms races, climates shifting with continental drift. Nothing in evolution is static. The Jurassic would eventually give way to the Cretaceous, a time of flowering plants, new dinosaurs, and ultimately another mass extinction. But before that, the Jurassic was Earth at its most magnificent, a world of giants walking through forests, of wings casting shadows over rivers, of seas filled with reptilian hunters. It was the true dawn of the age of reptiles, a chapter in life's story written on a scale both vast and intricate. In the next part of our journey, we will move into the Cretaceous period. Here, flowering plants will appear for the first time, dinosaurs will diversify into even more extraordinary forms, and mammals will begin to expand their roles. It was a world moving toward both climax and catastrophe, the final act of the dinosaurs before their sudden fall. The Cretaceous period, beginning about 145 million years ago, was a time of transformation. It carried forward the grandeur of the Jurassic, the giants of the land, the swimmers of the seas, the flyers of the skies, but added new elements that reshaped the biosphere forever. Among these were flowering plants, whose rise altered ecosystems in profound ways. The Cretaceous was also the final age of the dinosaurs, culminating in their catastrophic extinction. Yet it was not only an age of endings but of beginnings, setting the stage for the world we inhabit today. At the dawn of the Cretaceous, dinosaurs were already diverse and widespread. Sauropods still grazed the forests and plains, though their dominance was shifting in some regions. Theropods hunted across continents, from small feathered predators to larger apex carnivores. Ornithopods, agile and adaptable herbivores, formed herds. Ankylosaurs, armored with bony plates and clubs on their tails, defended themselves against attackers. Ceratopsians with horns and frills began their rise. The variety of forms reflected ecosystems full of niches, each filled by specialized creatures. But one of the most revolutionary developments of the Cretaceous did not walk on legs, but grew from soil. Angiosperms, the flowering plants. Before this time, Earth's flora was dominated by gymnosperms, conifers, cycads, ginkgos. These plants reproduced with cones and seeds exposed to the environment. Angiosperms, by contrast, encased their seeds within fruits and used flowers to attract pollinators. This innovation accelerated reproduction and dispersal. Within a few tens of millions of years, flowering plants spread across the globe, transforming landscapes into something we would recognize today. The rise of angiosperms triggered cascades through ecosystems. Insects diversified in response, evolving new relationships with flowers. Bees and butterflies, specialized pollinators, appeared. Herbivorous dinosaurs adapted to the new food sources, while mammals and birds exploited fruits and seeds. Flowering plants grew quickly compared to conifers, colonizing disturbed areas and changing fire cycles. They altered soils, rivers, and climates. Their success was rapid and overwhelming. By the end of the Cretaceous, angiosperms had become dominant in many regions. The seas of the Cretaceous were equally dynamic. Marine reptiles continued to rule, but their forms shifted. Ichthyosaurs, so dominant earlier, declined and disappeared by the mid-Cretaceous. In their place, plesiosaurs and mosasaurs thrived. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks or massive bodies, glided through oceans. Mosasaurs, close relatives of modern monitor lizards and snakes, became apex predators, some growing over 15 meters long. They hunted fish, ammonites, and even other marine reptiles. Sharks diversified as well, filling roles we recognize today. Ammonites, with their coiled shells, flourished until the very end of the period. Coral reefs built by new lineages created havens of biodiversity, much as they do today. In the skies, pterosaurs continued to dominate, but birds were on the rise. Descended from small feathered theropods, early birds diversified in the Cretaceous. They developed better flight capabilities, shorter tails, and specialized beaks. Their feathers, once used for insulation and display, were now refined for powered flight. Some were still primitive with teeth and claws, but others looked strikingly modern. Birds were poised to inherit the skies, even as pterosaurs reached their own climax, with forms like Quetzalcoatlus, one of the largest flying animals ever, with a wingspan rivaling small planes. On land, dinosaurs reached their peak diversity. Sauropods like Argentinosaurus grew to enormous sizes in South America, among the largest animals to ever exist. Theropods produced both giant predators like Spinosaurus, semi-aquatic with a sail-like back, and smaller feathered hunters. Ornithopods like Iguanodon and hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs, thrived in herds. Ceratopsians like Triceratops evolved elaborate frills and horns, used for defense, display, and perhaps social signaling. Ankylosaurs perfected their armor, with clubs capable of breaking predator bones. Each group displayed evolutionary innovation, adapted to changing climates, plants, and ecosystems. The climate of the Cretaceous was warm, with high sea levels flooding continents. Shallow seas covered much of North America, Europe, and Africa, dividing land into archipelagos. These inland seas created unique ecosystems, with marine life mixing with terrestrial environments. Tropical conditions supported lush forests of flowering plants, cycads, and conifers. Polar regions, though free of permanent ice, hosted forests that endured long winters of darkness. The Earth was both unified and diverse, with global warmth supporting high productivity. Mammals, though still small compared to dinosaurs, were diversifying. Some were insectivores, others omnivores, and a few even predators. They remained in ecological shadows but were experimenting with niches that would later expand after the extinction. Fossils reveal mammals with fur, differentiated teeth, and even early evidence of live birth. They were laying the groundwork for future success, biding their time in burrows and forests. The Cretaceous was not without challenges. Volcanic activity, shifting continents, and changing sea levels created stresses. But life was resilient, diversifying in waves, The period seemed to be one of abundance until its sudden, dramatic end. About 66 million years ago, at the close of the Cretaceous, disaster struck. A 10-kilometer-wide asteroid collided with Earth near the Yucatan Peninsula, creating the Chicxulub crater. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs. Shockwaves raced around the globe, forests ignited, megatsunamis crashed against coasts. Dust and aerosols filled the atmosphere, blocking sunlight. Photosynthesis faltered, food webs collapsed. In the immediate aftermath, many species perished. Dinosaurs, except for the lineage that became birds, were wiped out. Pterosaurs vanished, mosasaurs and plesiosaurs disappeared. Ammonites, so abundant for hundreds of millions of years, were gone. On land, many plants and smaller animals also suffered. The age of dinosaurs ended abruptly, not with gradual decline, but with catastrophe. Yet even in destruction, life persisted. Small mammals, adaptable and diverse, survived. Birds, agile and versatile, carried the legacy of dinosaurs into the future. Crocodiles, turtles, and some amphibians endured. Plants regrew once the skies cleared. Within a few million years, ecosystems began to recover, but the world was transformed. The extinction cleared ecological space, allowing mammals to radiate into niches once dominated by dinosaurs. From their modest beginnings, they would grow into forms as large as whales and as intelligent as humans. The Cretaceous thus stands as both climax and turning point. It was the zenith of dinosaur diversity, the rise of flowering plants, the flourishing of marine reptiles and ammonites, and the dawn of birds and mammals. It ended in one of Earth's most famous mass extinctions, but that ending seeded a new beginning. Without the asteroid, dinosaurs might still dominate today. Without the extinction, mammals might never have risen. Our existence depends on that moment of destruction. When we picture the Cretaceous, we should see a world vibrant and strange. Sauropods towering over forests of flowers, ceratopsians locking horns, hadrosaurs trumpeting across plains, Spinosaurus wading through rivers, pterosaurs soaring overhead, and mosasaurs patrolling seas. It was a world alive with motion, sound, and color, a world at its peak, and then gone in an instant. In the next part of our journey, we will step into the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. We will watch as survivors rebuilt ecosystems, as mammals diversified into astonishing forms, as birds flourished, and as Earth moved closer to the present. It was a new era, born from the ashes of the old, carrying forward the story of life's resilience. The asteroid that ended the Cretaceous had struck like a hammer, but its effects unfolded like a shroud. In the weeks and months that followed, the skies darkened. Sunlight, the engine of photosynthesis, was blocked by clouds of dust and aerosols. Plants withered, plankton populations collapsed, and food webs fractured. For years, perhaps decades, the Earth remained in ecological winter. But, as it always does, life endured. And when light returned, the survivors began to rebuild. This was the dawn of the Cenozoic era, the age of mammals. It began 66 million years ago and continues to this day. The Cenozoic is not simply the story of mammals, however. It is the story of recovery, of ecosystems reforming, of continents shifting, and of climates changing. It is the age when birds spread across skies, when grasses remade landscapes, when primates climbed trees, and when humans eventually emerged. The earliest chapters of the Cenozoic were dominated by emptiness. After the asteroid, many niches lay vacant. Large dinosaurs were gone, as were the marine reptiles and ammonites. Mammals, once small and nocturnal, now had opportunities to expand. Birds, descended from the only surviving dinosaurs, diversified rapidly. Reptiles like crocodiles and turtles persisted, holding to ancient ways. Insects rebounded, supporting the food chains that re-emerged. The Paleocene epoch, spanning the first 10 million years of the Cenozoic, was a time of quiet recovery. Forests regrew, covering much of the continents in green. Mammals remained small compared to later giants, but their diversity began to increase. Some were insectivores, others herbivores, and still others carnivores. Strange forms appeared like the condylarths, early ungulate-like mammals that would give rise to hoofed animals. Primates, small and arboreal, also emerged in these forests, their grasping hands and stereoscopic vision preparing them for futures far beyond the Paleocene. Birds flourished as well. Without pterosaurs in the skies, avian dinosaurs took over aerial niches. Some evolved into giant flightless predators like Gastornis, towering over early mammals. Others filled roles as seed-eaters, insectivores, or fishers. Their adaptability ensured their success across every continent. Marine ecosystems restructured too. With mosasaurs and plesiosaurs gone, other groups took their place. Sharks grew larger and more diverse. Teleost fishes expanded into countless forms. Marine mammals, descended from land-dwelling ancestors, had not yet evolved, but their story was soon to begin. The Paleocene was followed by the Eocene, beginning about 56 million years ago. Here, mammals truly began to flourish. By this time, many modern groups had appeared. Early horses no larger than dogs, primitive whales beginning their return to the sea, bats taking flight, primates diversifying in tropical forests. The Eocene climate was warm, almost tropical across much of the globe. Lush forests stretched even into polar regions. This warmth supported diversity, but it also created instability. One of the most dramatic events of the Eocene was the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, a sudden spike in global temperatures, triggered by massive releases of carbon, perhaps from volcanic activity or methane hydrates. The climate warmed by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius in a geologic instant. Polar ice melted, seas rose, and ecosystems shifted. Some species vanished, others migrated, and still others adapted. The thermal maximum is a stark reminder of how sensitive life is to climate and how quickly Earth can change. Amid these shifts, some of the most iconic lineages began their rise. Whales, for instance, began as land-dwelling mammals. Early forms like Pakicetus walked on 4 legs but hunted in rivers. Gradually, their descendants adapted more fully to aquatic life. Ambulocetus swam like an otter. Basilosaurus grew into a massive serpentine predator. By the late Eocene, whales had fully returned to the oceans, giving rise to the ancestors of today's dolphins, orcas, and baleen whales. Their story mirrors that of ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs before them, land animals returning to the sea, reshaping marine ecosystems. On land, ungulates diversified. Early horses evolved in North America, beginning small but gradually adapting to open grasslands. Rhinos, tapirs, and camels also appeared. Carnivorous mammals, ancestors of cats, dogs, and bears, began their ascent. In South America, isolated by oceans, unique mammals like giant ground sloths and terror birds evolved. Each continent became a laboratory, experimenting with forms and strategies. The Oligocene epoch, beginning about 34 million years ago, marked another turning point. Climate cooled, polar ice sheets formed, and ecosystems shifted. Forests contracted in some regions, giving way to grasslands and open habitats. Grasses themselves were evolutionary newcomers, but once they spread, they reshaped everything. Grazing mammals evolved high-crowned teeth to handle tough silica-rich blades. Herds formed, predators adapted, and landscapes transformed into savannas. The rise of grasslands was one of the most profound ecological changes of the Cenozoic. It supported the diversification of ungulates, horses, antelopes, cattle, elephants, and the predators that hunted them. It altered fire cycles, soil chemistry, and climate feedbacks. Grasslands became engines of biodiversity, shaping life on land in ways still felt today. The Miocene epoch, from 23 to 5 million years ago, brought the Cenozoic to its peak of mammalian diversity. Whales dominated the seas, including giants larger than any dinosaur. Among them was Leviathan, a sperm whale relative with enormous teeth, and Megalodon, a shark over 15 meters long that preyed on whales. On land, elephants, rhinos, and giraffes roamed. Apes diversified in African forests, experimenting with locomotion and social behavior. Grasses spread further, expanding savannas across continents. Climate cooled gradually, ice sheets grew larger, and ecosystems adapted. By the Pliocene, beginning 5 million years ago, the outlines of the modern world were clear. Continents had nearly reached their present positions. Ocean currents like the Gulf Stream began to circulate, reshaping climate. Grasslands supported vast herds of grazers, hunted by lions, cheetahs, and wolves. In Africa, hominins emerged, walking upright across savannas. Their brains grew, their tools became more sophisticated, and their societies more complex. From these beginnings would come humans, the storytellers of evolution. The Cenozoic, then, is not only the age of mammals, it is the age of birds, of grasses, of whales, of apes. It is the age when Earth became the planet we recognize. It carries lessons of resilience, of how life rebounds after catastrophe, and of fragility, for climates have shifted dramatically, and extinctions have shaped its course. When we look at the Cenozoic, we should see a panorama. Whales breaching in oceans, elephants roaming grasslands, terror birds striding across South America, apes swinging in forests, grasses bending in winds, and humans eventually walking upright. It is the age that connects us most directly to the past, for we are its product, its participants, its inheritors. In the next part of our journey, we will focus more closely on the rise of primates, the evolution of hominins, and the emergence of our own species. Evolution's story is not only about ancient oceans and vanished reptiles, it is also about us, how we came to be, and how we fit into the vast, ongoing saga of life. The Cenozoic had unfolded as the age of mammals, but within that great radiation, one branch held particular promise: the primates. From small, tree-dwelling ancestors, primates developed grasping hands, forward-facing eyes, and flexible limbs. These traits, useful for life among branches, would one day enable tool use, art, language, and civilization. To trace the story of primates is to trace the path that leads most directly to us. Primates likely originated in the Paleocene, shortly after the extinction of the dinosaurs. The earliest forms were small, nocturnal creatures scurrying through tropical forests, feeding on insects and fruit. By the Eocene, primates had diversified into distinct groups. Fossils like Nefarctus from North America and Adipis from Europe reveal lemur-like animals with grasping digits and large eyes. These early primates thrived in warm forested environments, moving nimbly through canopies. As climate cooled in the Oligocene, primates adapted. Many lineages disappeared in regions where forests contracted, but others survived in tropical belts. In Africa, early anthropoids, the ancestors of monkeys and apes, began to emerge. Fossils from the Fayum Depression in Egypt, such as Egyptopithecus, show creatures with more advanced jaws and brains, bridging the gap between earlier primates and later monkeys. The Miocene epoch was a turning point. From 23 to 5 million years ago, apes diversified dramatically. Forests stretched across Africa, Europe, and Asia, supporting a proliferation of ape species. Some swung through trees with long arms, others climbed cautiously, others ventured more onto the ground. Among them were ancestors of today's gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. Fossils like Proconsul reveal ape-like dentition and postures, though without the knuckle-walking or brachiation of modern relatives. The spread of grasslands during the Miocene reshaped primate evolution. As forests contracted, some apes adapted to more open habitats. They spent more time on the ground, feeding on grasses, roots, and scattered fruits. These environmental shifts set the stage for one of evolution's boldest experiments, bipedalism. The earliest hominins, the branch of apes that includes humans and our closest ancestors, appeared around 6 to 7 million years ago in Africa. Fossils like Sahelanthropus chadensis from Chad show a mix of ape-like and human-like features, including a flatter face and evidence of upright posture. Soon after came Ardipithecus, living around 4.4 million years ago. Ardi, as it is nicknamed, walked upright but also climbed trees, with feet adapted for grasping. Bipedalism was a radical shift. Walking on two legs freed the hands for carrying objects and manipulating tools. It changed the pelvis, spine, and legs, requiring new balances of strength and flexibility. It was costly too, exposing early hominins to predators in open habitats. But the advantages were significant: greater efficiency in long-distance travel, better thermoregulation under the sun, and eventually the ability to craft and carry tools. By 3 to 4 million years ago, Australopithecines dominated African landscapes. Species like Australopithecus afarensis, best known from the fossil Lucy, walked upright with a human-like gait, though their brains remained small. They lived in mixed environments of savannas and woodlands, feeding on plants and perhaps small animals. Their footprints, preserved in volcanic ash at Laetoli in Tanzania, show clear evidence of bipedal walking, human-like impressions left millions of years ago. Australopithecines persisted for nearly 2 million years, but within their lineage, new forms emerged with larger brains, more advanced tools, and greater adaptability. Around 2.5 million years ago, the genus Homo appeared. The earliest species, Homo habilis, crafted stone tools, earning the nickname Handy Man. Their tools were simple flakes and cores, but they represented a leap in cognition and culture. For the first time, technology entered the evolutionary story. Homo erectus followed around 1.8 million years ago and spread widely beyond Africa. With larger brains, more sophisticated tools, and evidence of fire use, Homo erectus was a pioneer. Fossils from Asia, Europe, and Africa show their adaptability to diverse environments. They hunted, gathered, and traveled long distances. Some lived in groups with social structures, suggesting cooperation and communication. Their longevity, surviving for nearly 2 million years, speaks to their success. From Homo erectus descended several lineages, including our own. Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, thrived in Europe and Western Asia, adapted to cold climates. They built shelters, crafted tools, and buried their dead. Denisovans, known from genetic evidence and a few fossils, inhabited parts of Asia. Other species like Homo floresiensis and Homo naledi reveal surprising diversity, each adapted to specific conditions. Our species, Homo sapiens, emerged in Africa around 300,000 years ago. With large, complex brains and symbolic thought, humans transformed culture, technology, and society. Art, language, and agriculture followed, reshaping evolution itself. Unlike earlier species, we became not just shaped by environments, but shapers of them. The rise of primates and hominins illustrates key themes of evolution. It shows the importance of environment, as shifting forests and grasslands guided adaptations. It shows the role of contingency, for our lineage was just one among many, and others could have flourished instead. It shows the intertwining of biology and culture, as tools, fire, and language altered selective pressures. Yet it also connects us to the deep past. Our hands, so adept with tools, evolved first to grasp branches. Our brains, so powerful, grew from the needs of social living and foraging. Our upright posture, so defining, began as an adaptation to savanna travel. Every trait carries echoes of earlier ancestors. When we reflect on primate evolution, we see not a ladder leading to humans, but a branching tree. Many branches ended, others persisted, and one led to us. We are not the pinnacle, but a product of chance and change. Like every other species, our story is part of evolution's broader narrative, not separate from it. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how Homo sapiens spread across the globe, how cultures and technologies accelerated, and how humans began to alter Earth itself. Evolution's story does not end with us, but we are its current authors, shaping both our own future and that of countless other species. Our species, Homo sapiens, arose in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago. For tens of thousands of years, we lived as hunter-gatherers, moving through savannas, forests, and coasts. We were one species among many, sharing the world with Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and other hominin lineages scattered across continents. Yet something about our lineage was different, not in our bodies alone, but in our minds. With language, cooperation, and symbolic thought, we would eventually reshape the entire planet. The first chapters of our story unfolded in Africa. Fossil evidence from places like Jebel Irhoud in Morocco shows early Homo sapiens with a mix of modern and archaic traits. Genetic studies confirm our African origin, tracing lineages back to small populations that endured climatic swings of ice ages and droughts. These early humans lived in bands, hunting antelope, fishing rivers, gathering roots and fruits. Their tools, though simple compared to later innovations, reveal skill and planning. They chipped stone into blades and scrapers, crafted points for spears, and used fire for warmth and cooking. Around 70,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens began leaving Africa. This migration was not a single wave, but a series of dispersals across millennia. Some followed coastlines into Arabia and South Asia. Others crossed into Europe, encountering Neanderthals. Still others moved eastward, reaching Southeast Asia and Australia by 60,000 years ago. By 15,000 years ago, humans had crossed into the Americas. In this span of time, a blink compared to billions of years of evolution, our species spread to every continent except Antarctica. Encounters with other hominins were complex. In Europe and Asia, humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, leaving traces of their DNA in us today. These genetic legacies influence our immune systems, our metabolisms, even our adaptations to altitude. Yet within a few tens of thousands of years, Neanderthals and Denisovans were gone. Their cultures and bodies vanished, absorbed partly into ours. Whether through competition, climate shifts, or assimilation, our species became the last hominin standing. What distinguished Homo sapiens? Our anatomy was advanced but not unique. Neanderthals had brains as large, sometimes larger than ours. What set us apart was our capacity for symbolic thought and cultural transmission. We made art, cave paintings in Lascaux and Chauvet, carvings of animals and humans, beads and ornaments. We buried our dead with care, suggesting belief or ritual. We told stories, shared knowledge, and built traditions. Culture became a force of evolution, shaping behavior and survival. Language was central. With speech, humans could share complex ideas, coordinate hunts, plan migrations, and preserve memories across generations. Knowledge was no longer limited to what one individual experienced. It could be passed, taught, expanded. This cumulative culture allowed rapid adaptation, faster than genetic evolution alone. In harsh climates, humans survived not by evolving new physiology, but by creating clothing, shelters, and tools. Innovation became our greatest adaptation. As humans spread, they transformed ecosystems. In Australia, the arrival of humans coincided with the extinction of giant marsupials like diprotodons and massive flightless birds. In the Americas, mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths disappeared within a few millennia of human colonization. Though climate change also played a role, hunting pressure was significant. For the first time, one species exerted planetary influence on megafauna. Around 12,000 years ago, another revolution began. The shift from foraging to farming. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, people domesticated wheat, barley, goats, and sheep. In China, rice and millet. In the Americas, maize, beans, and potatoes. Agriculture allowed permanent settlements, food surpluses, and population growth. Villages became towns, towns became cities, and civilizations arose. Evolution's story, long written by natural selection, now intertwined with culture, technology, and society. Domestication itself was an evolutionary process. Humans selected plants with larger seeds, animals with docile temperaments, traits that benefited survival under human care. Over generations, species like dogs, cattle, and corn diverged from their wild ancestors. Humans too changed. Our diets shifted, our teeth and jaws adapted, our populations grew dense, fostering immunity to new diseases. Coevolution between humans and domestic species reshaped both. The Holocene epoch, beginning after the last ice age, was the cradle of human civilization. Climate stabilized, supporting agriculture. Cities like Uruk, Mohenjo-Daro, and Teotihuacan flourished. Writing, law, trade, and religion developed. Empires rose and fell. Through it all, evolution continued, though its pace in humans was altered by culture. Lactose tolerance spread in populations that herded cattle. Resistance to malaria spread in regions with agriculture. Genes and culture danced together, shaping humanity in new ways. But our impact extended far beyond ourselves. Forests were cleared, rivers diverted, soils tilled. Species were domesticated, others driven extinct. From a few million hunter-gatherers, humanity grew into billions, altering landscapes at planetary scale. Evolution's story had entered a new phase, one species reshaping the biosphere in conscious and unconscious ways. The global spread of humans also accelerated cultural evolution. Knowledge accumulated rapidly, technologies advanced, and interactions between societies exchanged crops, ideas, and innovations. The Columbian Exchange after 1492, for instance, transferred potatoes, maize, and tomatoes across continents, transforming diets and populations. Industrialization in the last 2 centuries multiplied human impact, burning fossil fuels, altering climates, and driving unprecedented change. Yet even as we dominate, we remain part of evolution. Our genomes still adapt, our bodies still shaped by selection pressures. Diseases exert selective forces, diets influence physiology, environments challenge survival. At the same time, we now guide evolution intentionally, breeding crops, engineering genes, even contemplating synthetic life. We have become both subjects and authors of evolution. To see the human story in the context of billions of years is to gain perspective. We are recent, fragile, contingent. Our dominance is measured in millennia compared to microbes' billions, and yet our capacity for culture, language, and technology gives us power far beyond our numbers. We carry responsibility not only for ourselves, but for the countless species that share Earth with us. In the next part of our journey, we will reflect on the Anthropocene, the proposed new epoch shaped by human activity. We will explore how our actions are driving extinctions, altering climates, and transforming ecosystems, and what this means for the future of evolution. The Holocene, the epoch that began roughly 11,700 years ago at the end of the last ice age, brought stability. Seasons became predictable, glaciers retreated, and climates warmed. It was in this window of relative calm that human civilizations flourished, building cities, cultivating crops, and raising animals. But as our numbers grew and our technologies advanced, the scale of our influence expanded beyond anything the Earth had experienced before. Many scientists argue that we now live in a new epoch, the Anthropocene, the age of humans. The Anthropocene is not officially recognized in the geological timescale, but the evidence for its distinctiveness is overwhelming. Never before has a single species altered the biosphere so profoundly, so quickly. Our fingerprints are everywhere, in the carbon dioxide of the atmosphere, in the plastic scattered through oceans, in the radioactive isotopes embedded in sediments, in the bones of domestic animals that now far outnumber wild ones. Evolution continues, but increasingly it is shaped by us. One of the most visible changes is extinction. Throughout Earth's history, species have vanished, sometimes gradually, sometimes in mass events. Today, extinction rates are accelerating at a pace unmatched since the asteroid that ended the Cretaceous. Forest clearing, overhunting, pollution, and climate change drive species toward oblivion. Amphibians decline as habitats vanish. Insects, crucial pollinators, dwindle in numbers. Large mammals like elephants and rhinos are pushed toward the brink. The ongoing biodiversity crisis is often called the sixth mass extinction. It is not yet as severe as the great dying of the Permian, but the trajectory is alarming. Yet evolution does not stop with loss. It adapts. Some species thrive in human-altered landscapes. Rats, pigeons, cockroaches, and crows flourish in cities. Coyotes spread across North America, adjusting to suburbs and highways. Plants colonize abandoned lots. Weeds evolve resistance to herbicides. Bacteria evolve resistance to antibiotics. Evolution under human influence is rapid, sometimes observable within decades. Our presence accelerates natural selection in new directions. Domestication, begun thousands of years ago, now extends into new realms. We have shaped crops like wheat, rice, and maize into forms unrecognizable from their wild ancestors. We have bred dogs into hundreds of breeds, from Chihuahuas to Great Danes. We have transformed wild cattle into the billions of livestock that populate Earth today. Genetic engineering takes this further, inserting genes across species boundaries, creating crops resistant to pests or animals that grow faster. We are no longer only products of evolution, but engineers of it. Climate change is another powerful force of our making. By burning fossil fuels, we have released vast amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Temperatures rise, ice sheets melt, seas climb. Habitats shift poleward and upward, species migrate or perish. Coral reefs bleach as waters warm, polar bears struggle as sea ice vanishes. Forests burn in intensified wildfires. Evolutionary pressures intensify as species race to adapt to changes unfolding over decades, not millennia. In oceans, our impact is profound. Overfishing depletes stocks, plastic debris chokes waters, and acidification erodes shells and reefs. Marine life must adapt to new chemical realities, selecting for resilience in ways not seen before. On land, deforestation and agriculture fragment habitats, isolating populations and altering gene flow. Even the night sky is transformed. Artificial light confuses migrating birds and insects, reshaping behaviors evolved over millions of years. And yet the Anthropocene is not only a story of destruction, it is also a story of awareness. Unlike the asteroid or the volcanoes of deep time, our species can see what is happening. We measure carbon levels, track extinctions, and model climates. We recognize our role. That recognition carries the possibility of change. Conservation efforts protect endangered species. Restoration projects replant forests and wetlands. Laws restrict pollutants, protect waters, and set aside reserves. Though imperfect, these efforts reflect a new dimension in evolution: conscious stewardship. Humans themselves continue to evolve. Genetic studies reveal adaptations to high altitudes in Tibetans and Andeans, resistance to diseases in populations long exposed to malaria, and metabolic traits linked to diets. Modern medicine alters selection pressures, preserving traits that might once have been fatal. Technology extends lifespans, reshapes reproduction, and now even contemplates editing genomes directly. The boundary between natural and artificial selection blurs. The Anthropocene challenges us to reflect on our place in evolution. We are not outside nature, but a part of it. Our cities are ecosystems, our bodies host trillions of microbes, our technologies alter selective pressures. The choices we make ripple across species and generations. Evolution continues, but its trajectory is entwined with our own decisions. To understand the Anthropocene in the grand arc of evolution is to see both continuity and rupture. Continuity because species have always influenced one another: beavers damming rivers, corals building reefs, trees reshaping climates. Rupture because never before has one species wielded such global power, altering cycles of carbon, nitrogen, and water, driving extinctions, and contemplating even the engineering of life itself. And yet, our future is not predetermined. Evolution teaches resilience. Life has survived asteroids, volcanoes, ice ages, and extinctions. It will survive us too. The question is not whether life will continue, but what form it will take, and whether we will remain part of it. Our actions in the coming centuries will shape not only our own destiny, but the trajectory of countless other species. The Anthropocene is, above all, a mirror. It shows us our power and our fragility. It shows us that we are not separate from the tree of life, but one branch, heavy with influence, capable of pruning or nurturing the others. To live wisely in this epoch is to accept responsibility, to see ourselves not as rulers of evolution, but as stewards of it. In the next part of our journey, we will bring together the threads of life's history, from microbes to mammals, from extinctions to rebirths, and reflect on what evolution means for us today. The story of life is not finished, and neither is ours. The Anthropocene, if we accept it as a distinct epoch, is not only about extinction and loss, it is also about acceleration, an evolutionary tempo that has never been seen before in Earth's history. For billions of years, adaptation was gradual, sculpted by slow changes in climate and geography, punctuated by catastrophe. Now, in the span of centuries, sometimes even decades, selective pressures arise and shift with stunning speed. Humanity has become the single greatest driver of change, and life is adapting in response. Consider cities. Urban environments are some of the newest ecosystems on Earth, yet they already exert strong evolutionary forces. Birds in metropolitan areas sing at higher pitches to be heard above traffic. Moths that once camouflaged against tree bark now adapt to concrete and brick. Insects evolve resistance to pesticides within years, creating super-resilient populations. Even the shape and size of animals can shift. Some fish in polluted rivers grow smaller and reproduce earlier, trading longevity for survival in harsh waters. Evolution is not abstract. It is happening around us, shaped by the environments we create. Agriculture, too, reshapes evolution. Crops are bred for yield, resilience, and flavor, but weeds evolve resistance to herbicides, forcing new cycles of chemical innovation. Insects targeted by pesticides adapt quickly, requiring stronger measures or alternative strategies. Livestock, bred intensively, accumulate traits favorable to production but sometimes harmful to health. And in response, wild species that interact with farms, from wolves to rodents to microbes, adjust their behaviors and genetics to exploit human-altered landscapes. Perhaps the most striking example of rapid evolution under human influence is disease. Bacteria and viruses evolve at extraordinary speeds, adapting to antibiotics and antivirals. Antibiotic resistance, a direct result of medical and agricultural practices, creates superbugs that defy treatment. Influenza, HIV, and coronaviruses mutate constantly, challenging our immune systems and medical tools. In this arena, evolution is visible within human lifetimes, a stark reminder of natural selection's relentless power. But humans themselves are evolving too. While cultural and technological innovations buffer us from some pressures, they also create new ones. In populations with long histories of dairy farming, genetic mutations allowing adults to digest lactose became widespread. In high-altitude regions like the Andes, Tibet, and Ethiopia, unique genetic adaptations support survival with less oxygen. In regions where malaria is prevalent, traits like sickle cell hemoglobin spread despite their costs, offering resistance to the disease. Evolution continues to shape our biology, even as we reshape our world. Yet in the Anthropocene, evolution is not only natural, it is increasingly intentional. Genetic engineering, selective breeding, and biotechnology give humans the ability to alter organisms directly. We create crops with inserted genes for pest resistance, goats that produce medicines in their milk, and bacteria engineered to consume pollutants. Synthetic biology even contemplates building life from scratch, designing genomes with specific purposes. This is evolution guided not by chance mutation, but by conscious design. It represents a profound shift in the story of life. And alongside engineering comes conservation. As extinctions accelerate, humans also attempt to preserve. Breeding programs for endangered species, reintroductions into the wild, and genetic rescue techniques aim to counteract losses. Some propose using ancient DNA to revive extinct species, such as mammoths, not only as marvels of science, but as ecological restorers. Whether feasible or wise, these efforts show humanity grappling with its role as steward, not only disruptor, of evolution. The Anthropocene is also marked by climate migration. Species shift their ranges as temperatures rise, moving poleward or upward into higher elevations. Coral reefs migrate slowly, if at all, making them vulnerable to warming seas. Birds change their migration routes, insects expand into new territories, forests creep northward. These shifts create novel ecosystems, where species that never before coexisted now interact. Some thrive, others falter, but all are caught in an unprecedented reshuffling of life. In the oceans, acidification and warming drive changes at every level. Phytoplankton, the base of marine food webs, shift distributions. Fish follow changing currents, altering coastal economies. Predators find their prey less predictable, while invasive species arrive with warming waters. In polar regions, melting ice opens new habitats, but also destroys ones long relied upon by seals, polar bears, and penguins. Evolution will follow these shifts, but whether it can keep pace with the speed of change is uncertain. The question of speed is central. Evolution typically unfolds over thousands, millions of years, but human-driven changes happen in centuries or decades. Can species adapt fast enough? Some can. Insects, bacteria, and small mammals with short generation times often evolve rapidly, but large animals, trees, and corals, with slower reproduction, struggle to keep up. For them, extinction looms more readily. The Anthropocene is not only about new adaptations, but about mismatches in tempo. This acceleration brings us to a paradox. Humanity has become both destroyer and creator, both threat and savior. We drive extinctions, but we also protect species. We pollute, but we also clean. We alter genes, but we also preserve them in frozen vaults. Our role is not singular. It is complex, layered, contradictory. To understand evolution in the Anthropocene is to accept this duality. But evolution's story does not pause with our dilemmas. Beyond Earth, we contemplate carrying life into space. Mars colonization, asteroid mining, interstellar travel. These ideas, once science fiction, now creep into serious discussion. If life expands beyond Earth, it will encounter entirely new environments, new selective pressures, Gravity, radiation, atmosphere, or their absence will shape future adaptations. Perhaps new species of plants, animals, and even humans will evolve among the stars. In this way, the Anthropocene may not be the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter in which life itself becomes interplanetary. Still, the Earth remains our only home for now, and its story is far from finished. The Anthropocene represents not a conclusion, but a hinge. The choices we make will determine whether biodiversity contracts into impoverishment or whether ecosystems flourish alongside us. They will determine whether evolution unfolds with richness or scarcity, whether resilience is supported or suppressed. The lessons of the past offer guidance. Catastrophes have come before, but recovery always followed, though often over millions of years. Extinction clears, but it also erases. Diversity takes time to rebuild, and once lost, it cannot be regained quickly. Our era differs because we can see what is happening. Unlike the trilobites of the Ordovician or the dinosaurs of the Cretaceous, we are aware. We measure, record, and debate. This awareness is unprecedented. It is perhaps our greatest evolutionary trait. Awareness, however, brings responsibility. We are stewards of Earth whether we wish it or not. The Anthropocene asks us, will we wield our influence blindly or with wisdom? Will we leave behind a world diminished or one that continues to thrive? Evolution will proceed regardless, but its richness, its vibrancy, depends on us. In the next part of our journey, we will step back from the immediacy of the Anthropocene and consider the deep future. What will evolution look like in tens of thousands, millions, or even billions of years? How will life adapt to continents drifting, climates shifting, and the sun itself changing? And where might humanity, or our descendants, fit into that story? The Anthropocene reminds us that the present is fragile, but evolution has always looked ahead, even if blindly. Life is not static. It changes, adapts, and diversifies as environments shift. To imagine the deep future of Earth is to imagine how evolution might unfold across timescales, longer than human history, longer even than civilization. The next chapters of life will not be measured in decades or centuries, but in millions of years, shaped by forces far larger than us. In the near future, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years, humanity may still be here. Our civilizations may rise and fall, our technologies may advance beyond imagination, or collapse back into simplicity. But whatever happens, evolution will continue. Humans will keep evolving, whether subtly through shifts in diet and disease, or dramatically if new environments demand it. In small, isolated populations, genetic drift will create new variations. If humans colonize other worlds, adaptations to gravity, radiation, and atmosphere could diverge lineages into forms alien, yet still recognizably human. Our story will remain part of evolution's larger arc. Other species too will respond to our influence. Domesticated plants and animals may evolve into forms suited to entirely human-dominated ecosystems. Weeds, pests, and commensals like rats and pigeons may radiate further, carried with us wherever we go. Wild species may adapt to fragmented habitats, creating new evolutionary pathways. Already, scientists speak of urban ecosystems as cradles of rapid adaptation. In 100,000 years, such ecosystems may host entirely new species born from today's opportunists. Over millions of years, larger forces take hold. Plate tectonics will shift continents. Africa will continue moving north, eventually colliding with Europe and closing the Mediterranean Sea. The Atlantic Ocean, still widening, may begin to shrink again in tens of millions of years, drawing continents together. Supercontinents have formed before, Pangaea, Rodinia, Columbia, and they will form again. The next supercontinent, sometimes called Pangaea Proxima, will reshape climate and biodiversity. Interiors may become arid deserts, while coasts teem with life. Species will adapt to new mountain ranges, inland seas, and merged ecosystems. Climate, too, will evolve. Ice ages will come and go in cycles driven by Earth's orbital rhythms. Deserts will expand and contract. Forests will retreat and regrow. Over millions of years, the atmosphere itself may change, influenced by volcanic activity, continental positions, and the long-term carbon cycle. Species will adapt, migrating, evolving or vanishing. New lineages of mammals, birds, and reptiles will arise, just as new lineages of amphibians and fish will appear in rivers and seas. Evolution will not pause simply because humans once walked the earth, but deep time extends further still. In hundreds of millions of years, the sun will gradually brighten. Earth will grow warmer, seas will rise, climates will shift. Photosynthesis may become less efficient as carbon dioxide declines, stressing plant life. Forests could thin, grasslands shrink, deserts expand. Species will adapt where possible, but eventually the biosphere will contract. Just as trilobites and dinosaurs are now fossils, so too will today's species vanish, leaving room for others not yet imagined. Speculation about the far future is bold but instructive. If mammals continue to dominate, what new forms might arise? Could birds diversify into niches once held by mammals? Could octopuses or other intelligent invertebrates rise to greater prominence if conditions favor them? Evolution is opportunistic, not planned. The survivors of tomorrow may be modest species today, small, adaptable, overlooked. Rats, cockroaches, and crows, thriving alongside humans, may seed entirely new radiations millions of years hence. Extinction, as always, will shape the path. Just as the asteroid ended dinosaurs' reign, new catastrophes may reset the biosphere. Supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, or even human-driven collapses could trigger mass extinctions. Each would prune the tree of life, but also open niches for survivors. The history of Earth tells us that life rebounds, often with new creativity. The question is not whether evolution will continue, but what form it will take. And beyond Earth, the future may hold even stranger possibilities. If life spreads to Mars, Europa, or beyond, evolution will follow. On Mars, with its thin atmosphere and cold surface, humans or engineered organisms might evolve unique traits to survive. In sealed colonies, isolation could drive divergence. On icy moons, subsurface, oceans may host microbial life that evolves along entirely separate paths, unconnected to Earth. If humanity ventures to other stars carrying seeds, spores, and genes, we may plant life where none existed before, beginning new evolutionary stories far from home. Yet all these futures are finite. In 1 billion years, the sun's brightness will rise enough to make Earth's surface uninhabitable. Oceans will evaporate, plate tectonics may stall, and the biosphere will collapse. Microbes may persist underground or in high-altitude refuges, but complex life will fade. The long reign of evolution on Earth will enter its twilight. In 5 billion years, the sun will swell into a red giant, consuming or scorching the planet. By then, Earth's evolutionary story will be complete, its fossils buried, its species forgotten. And still, the legacy of life will endure. The oxygen in our atmosphere, the strata of coal and limestone, the fossils embedded in rock, all will testify to billions of years of adaptation and resilience. Even if Earth is gone, the fact that life once thrived here will remain written in the geology of the solar system. If life has spread beyond Earth, then the story of evolution will outlast the planet itself, continuing in alien environments, shaped by forces we cannot yet imagine. To think of the future of evolution is to confront both humility and possibility. Humility because we are small in the sweep of time. Possibility because life's creativity is boundless. From single-celled ancestors came forests, reefs, dinosaurs, whales, and humans. From microbes, intelligence arose. What might arise from us, or after us, is unknowable but certain. Life will change. In the next part of our journey, we will draw together these threads of past, present, and future, reflecting on the meaning of evolution itself. What does this vast story tell us about resilience, about chance, about our place within it? And how does knowing this story shape the way we see our lives today? To tell the story of evolution is to recount an epic that stretches across timescales almost too vast to comprehend. It is a narrative of change, branching, extinction, and survival. Yet beyond the scientific details, evolution also invites reflection. What does this story mean? What lessons does it hold for us, the creatures able to look back and contemplate it? In this part of our journey, we step away from fossils and genetics to consider the deeper philosophy of evolution. the balance between chance and necessity, the role of contingency, and the meaning humans draw from life's long saga. At its core, evolution is not directed. It has no end goal, no foresight, no guiding hand. Natural selection acts on variation, favoring traits that help organisms survive and reproduce in particular environments. Mutations occur randomly, but selection is not random. It is shaped by necessity, by the need to eat, to avoid being eaten, to reproduce, to withstand heat or cold. Out of this interplay arises adaptation. But adaptation is always provisional. It works for a moment, a place, a circumstance. When environments change, what once was useful may become useless or even harmful. Evolution is not progress, it is response. And yet, from this process without plan, astonishing complexity has emerged. Eyes evolved independently multiple times. Flight arose in insects, birds, pterosaurs, and bats. Sociality developed in ants, dolphins, and humans. Intelligence flowered in octopuses, crows, and primates. These parallels suggest that while evolution is contingent, certain solutions are so effective that they appear repeatedly. When life encounters similar challenges, necessity shapes similar outcomes. Still, chance plays an immense role. The asteroid that struck 66 million years ago was not inevitable. Without it, dinosaurs might still dominate, and mammals might remain small nocturnal creatures. The great dying of the Permian, caused by volcanism and climate collapse, erased lineages that might have flourished. These events remind us that evolution is not a steady march, but a fragile branching, pruned and redirected by accidents of geology and astronomy. We exist not because we were destined to, but because countless contingencies aligned. This interplay of chance and necessity is what gives evolution its philosophical depth. We are both products of random events and participants in lawful processes. Our bodies bear the marks of accidents, a laryngeal nerve looping unnecessarily in the chest, wisdom teeth crowded into jaws too small for them, and the marks of refinement, eyes that perceive color, hands that manipulate tools, brains that reflect on themselves. We are mosaics of history, written in bone and blood. What meaning can we draw from this? For some, evolution seems to strip life of purpose. If we are accidents, is there meaning at all? But another perspective is that evolution grants a deeper, more profound meaning, that life itself is remarkable precisely because it is not guaranteed. The fact that we exist, that any consciousness exists, is extraordinary in a universe where lifelessness is far more common. To recognize this contingency is to recognize the preciousness of life. Evolution also teaches humility. We are not separate from nature nor its pinnacle. We are one branch among many, sharing ancestry with every living thing. The DNA in our cells differs only slightly from that of chimpanzees, less so than between some species of frogs. Even bacteria share elements of our genetic code. To see this kinship is to dissolve the illusion of separateness. We are part of Earth's community of life, deeply connected to its history and future. And yet, humans are distinct in one respect. We tell stories. Other animals remember, learn, and communicate, but only humans weave narratives that stretch across generations, binding past to present to future. Evolution is one of our greatest stories because it is not myth but reality, drawn from fossils, genomes, and rocks. It is the story of how we came to be, and by extension, the story of all life. To tell it is to situate ourselves within something vast and ongoing. But stories also shape choices. How we view evolution influences how we act. If we see ourselves as rulers of life, we exploit. If we see ourselves as participants, we steward. The Anthropocene reveals the consequences of forgetting our kinship with life. Extinctions, climate change, disruption. To embrace evolution as our story is to accept responsibility, to see ourselves not as outside of nature, but within it, bound to its fates. There is also wonder in the details. The fact that trilobites once crawled across seafloors, that dragonflies once grew as large as hawks, that whales evolved from hoofed land animals. Each is astonishing. Each shows the creativity of life, the endless capacity for adaptation. When we learn these stories, we glimpse not only facts but imagination. Evolution writes with time as its ink, earth as its paper, and chance as its pen. To many, this story also brings comfort. Death, extinction, loss, these are inevitable, but they are not the end. From loss comes renewal. After every mass extinction, life returned with new abundance. After every collapse, new lineages rose. Evolution is a story of resilience as much as of fragility. To know this is to see hope, even in times of crisis. Life is not easily extinguished. It endures, though not always in the forms we know. And finally, evolution shapes how we view the future. If life is contingent, then the future is open. There is no predetermined destiny, no fixed outcome. We shape part of it through our choices, but much remains beyond our control. This openness is both daunting and liberating. It means responsibility, but also possibility. The future could hold decline, or it could hold renewal. It could see us fade, or see us seed life across the stars. Evolution does not promise either, but it makes both possible. In the next part of our journey, we will approach the close of this series by returning to Earth's history in its entirety. We will revisit the great turning points, the origin of life, the rise of animals, the flowering of plants, the reign of dinosaurs, the emergence of mammals, the ascent of humans, and reflect on them as milestones in a single vast continuum. The story of evolution is too immense for any one part to capture, but as we draw near the end, we can trace its arc with greater clarity. The story of evolution stretches across almost 4 billion years. To appreciate its full sweep, it helps to step back and view it not in fragments but in milestones, the great turning points that reshape the course of life. These moments are not evenly spaced, nor are they predictable. They arise from chemistry, from geology, from chance. Each one redefined what was possible, opening new worlds for life to explore. The first milestone was the origin of life itself. On a young Earth some 3.8 to 4 billion years ago, chemistry crossed into biology. Simple molecules organized into self-replicating systems, powered by energy from sunlight, lightning, or hydrothermal vents. The details remain uncertain, but once replication began, evolution followed. Natural selection worked on molecules, favoring those that copied with greater stability and efficiency. Out of this process emerged the first cells. Microbial life became Earth's foundation, persisting for billions of years. The second milestone was photosynthesis. Around 2.5 billion years ago, some bacteria learned to harness sunlight, splitting water and releasing oxygen as waste. This innovation changed everything. Oxygen accumulated in the atmosphere during the Great Oxidation Event, altering oceans and air. It was toxic to many organisms, but others adapted, using oxygen to fuel more powerful metabolisms. This shift paved the way for complexity, for energy-intensive processes like multicellularity. The third milestone was the origin of eukaryotes, cells with nuclei and organelles. Through symbiosis, ancient bacteria became mitochondria and chloroplasts, providing energy and photosynthesis. This partnership allowed larger, more complex cells. With eukaryotes, the door opened to multicellular life. The fourth milestone was the Cambrian explosion, around 540 million years ago. In a geologic blink, diverse body plans appeared. Trilobites, mollusks, worms, early vertebrates, the ancestors of nearly every modern group. The seas filled with predators and prey, armor and eyes, speed and strength. Evolution's creative potential burst into visibility, shaping ecosystems still recognizable today. The fifth milestone was the colonization of land. Plants crept ashore first, anchoring in soils, altering atmospheres, stabilizing landscapes. Fungi partnered with roots, drawing nutrients. Insects followed, feeding on greenery, pollinating flowers. Vertebrates dragged themselves from water, evolving lungs, limbs, and eggs that could withstand dryness. The transition to land opened vast new realms, from forests to deserts, and life expanded to fill them. The sixth milestone was the rise of vertebrate dominance. Amphibians gave way to reptiles, whose amniotic eggs freed them from ponds. Dinosaurs arose, diversifying into giants on land, swimmers in seas, and flyers in skies. For 150 million years they ruled, evolving into countless forms, including birds, their living descendants. Mammals coexisted, small and nocturnal, but resilient. The Mesozoic was their crucible, shaping traits that would matter later. The seventh milestone was extinction, specifically the asteroid impact 66 million years ago. In an instant, dinosaurs, save for birds, pterosaurs, and marine reptiles vanished. Ecosystems collapsed, yet mammals, birds, and other survivors endured. Extinction, catastrophic though it was, opened niches for new lineages. It was a reset that shifted the trajectory of life toward mammals, primates, and ultimately humans. The eighth milestone was the rise of mammals. Freed from dinosaur dominance, they diversified into whales, bats, elephants, primates, rodents, carnivores. Grasslands spread, shaping grazing animals and predators. Birds flourished in the skies. Forests and savannas teemed with life. Mammals grew large, smart, and social. Out of this radiation came apes, and from apes, humans. The ninth milestone was culture. With Homo sapiens, evolution gained a new dimension. Tools, language, art, and agriculture transformed selective pressures. Technology allowed rapid adaptation to environments beyond the pace of genetic change. Civilizations arose, altering landscapes, driving extinctions, creating new ecosystems. Evolution continued, but now intertwined with culture in a feedback loop unique to humanity. These 9 milestones chart the broad arc of life, from chemistry to microbes, from microbes to animals, from animals to intelligence. They remind us that evolution is not steady or smooth. It leaps, it stalls, it resets. Catastrophes destroy, but they also create. Chance reshuffles, necessity refines. Each milestone is both an ending and a beginning. And yet, beyond these, there are countless smaller turning points. The evolution of eyes appearing in multiple lineages, the invention of wings giving rise to insects, birds, bats, the partnership of fungi and plants creating forests, the social structures of ants and bees rivaling human societies in complexity. Evolution is not only about great leaps, but about small innovations compounded over time. When we look at these milestones together, a pattern emerges. Life expands into new spaces whenever it can. Oceans, land, air, underground, inside other organisms. Each habitat becomes a frontier. Evolution's creativity is relentless, probing every possibility. Some experiments fail, others succeed, but always life persists. For us, these milestones are not distant abstractions. They are our inheritance. Our cells carry mitochondria, once free-living bacteria. Our bones trace back to fish fins. Our lungs evolved from adaptations to air breathing long ago. Our ability to digest starch reflects the rise of agriculture. Our very existence depends on extinctions that cleared space for mammals. To know this is to see ourselves not as separate from evolution, but as part of its continuum. In the next part of our journey, we will draw nearer to closure by reflecting on how evolution's story changes the way we see ourselves and our world. Beyond science, what wisdom can we carry from billions of years of adaptation, resilience, and chance? And what responsibilities do we hold, knowing we are both products of evolution and shapers of its future? To know the story of evolution is to see the world differently. It is not simply a chronicle of ancient seas and vanished creatures, but a lens through which every living thing gains new significance. The bird on a telephone wire is not only a bird, it is a descendant of dinosaurs, its feathers and hollow bones refined by millions of years of flight. The grass beneath our feet is not only green ground cover, it is the result of an evolutionary innovation that reshaped entire continents. The human face in a mirror is not only an individual, it is the sum of adaptations stretching back through primates, mammals, reptiles, fish, and microbes. Evolution reshapes our vision, showing us kinship, fragility, and responsibility. Kinship is the first lesson. Evolution reveals that all life is related, joined by ancestry. Our DNA differs little from that of chimpanzees, less than 2%, and even less from bonobos. But the kinship extends further. We share about half our genes with fruit flies, a quarter with cabbages, and significant stretches with yeast. These connections are not metaphors, but measurable realities. They remind us that life is one great family, diversified yet unified, To harm other species is, in a sense, to harm distant relatives. To protect them is to honor our shared heritage. This kinship also fosters wonder. A whale surfacing, a dragonfly hovering, a mushroom unfolding in the dark. Each is not just itself, but a branch of the same tree of life to which we belong. Their strangeness becomes less alien when we see the connections, and at the same time, their uniqueness becomes more precious. Evolution gives us both unity and diversity, sameness and difference woven together. Fragility is the second lesson. Evolution shows us that species, no matter how successful, can vanish. Trilobites thrived for 270 million years before disappearing in the Permian extinction. Dinosaurs reigned for over 150 million years, yet a single asteroid ended their dominance. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and countless other species have risen and fallen. Extinction is part of the pattern, inevitable over long spans, but today fragility is heightened by our influence. The biodiversity crisis is not distant or abstract, it is unfolding around us. To understand evolution is to understand how easily branches of life's tree can be pruned away. And yet, fragility is balanced by resilience. Life has survived 5 mass extinctions, each devastating, each reshaping the biosphere. After the Great Dying, ecosystems rebuilt. After the asteroid, mammals flourished. Even in extreme conditions, boiling vents, frozen wastes, toxic lakes, microbes persist. Evolution teaches that life endures, even when forms change. This resilience is not permission for carelessness, but inspiration for hope. Even in crisis, life adapts. Responsibility is the third lesson. Evolution places us within the story, not above it. We are products of the same processes that shaped trilobites, dinosaurs, and whales. But unlike them, we can reflect. We can see patterns, measure impacts, and anticipate futures. With awareness comes responsibility. We cannot erase our influence, but we can choose its direction. We can drive extinctions or foster diversity, pollute or restore, exploit or steward. Evolution does not tell us what to value, but it shows us the consequences of choices. Responsibility also extends to ourselves. Evolution shows that humans are adaptable but not invincible. Civilizations depend on ecosystems, climates, and resources. If we destabilize them, we destabilize ourselves. To understand our evolutionary roots is to understand our dependence on Earth's systems. Our technology does not free us from nature. It binds us more tightly, making us responsible for larger webs. Beyond kinship, fragility, and responsibility, evolution also reshapes how we see meaning. We often search for purpose beyond ourselves, in myths or heavens. Evolution offers a different perspective. That meaning can arise from contingency. That we exist at all in a universe vast and often lifeless is astonishing. Life is not inevitable, and consciousness rarer still. This rarity makes it precious. To know we are accidents does not diminish us. It makes our existence more extraordinary. Evolution also reframes time. Human lives are short, civilizations brief, species ephemeral. But within evolution's span, we are part of something enduring. Our bones, if fossilized, could speak to distant futures. Our actions, written in carbon levels and extinction rates, will echo for millions of years. We live within a vast story, our chapter brief but not insignificant. And perhaps the deepest lesson is humility. Evolution humbles us by reminding us that we are not the goal, not the pinnacle, not the climax. We are one branch, flourishing now, perhaps to vanish one day. But it also elevates us by giving us awareness. No trilobite or dinosaur could look back and see the whole tree of life. We can. We hold the ability to understand, to reflect, to imagine. This awareness is our gift and our burden. As we near the end of our journey, these lessons intertwine. Kinship calls us to see all life as connected. Fragility calls us to protect what can be lost. Responsibility calls us to act wisely in shaping the future. Meaning calls us to cherish existence itself. Humility calls us to recognize our place. Evolution, in its science and philosophy, reshapes how we live. In the next and final part of our journey, we will close the circle. We will reflect on the entirety of evolution's story, its beginnings, its upheavals, its creativity, and consider how knowing this story changes us. The end will not be a conclusion, for evolution does not end. It will be a pause, a recognition, a reminder that the story goes on and that we are part of it still. To tell the story of evolution is to walk a path across deep time, a path so long and winding that our own steps feel impossibly small, and yet, by tracing it, we come to see ourselves more clearly. From the first molecules that copied themselves in ancient seas, through the branching of microbes, the rise of animals, the reign of dinosaurs, the flowering of plants, the ascent of mammals, and the emergence of humans, the arc of evolution is one of both change and continuity. It is a story that begins before us and will continue long after, yet in this moment it is ours to tell. When we look back to the origins, we see life as chemistry transformed into complexity. For billions of years, microbes alone held the earth. They shaped its atmosphere, its soils, its oceans. We are still their descendants, our cells carrying their legacy in mitochondria and DNA. Without them, nothing else would follow. They remind us that greatness is not always visible and that endurance can matter more than scale. When we look to the Cambrian seas, we see life's creativity unleashed. From soft-bodied ancestors came skeletons, armor, eyes, and speed. The ecosystems that formed then set the stage for everything that followed. Diversity flourished, not as progress, but as possibility. Life learned to move, to hunt, to hide, to sense, to compete. The Cambrian explosion was not only a burst of forms, but a burst of futures. When we see the colonization of land, we see ambition. Plants claimed soil, fungi partnered with roots, insects took to the air, vertebrates grew lungs and limbs. The earth transformed into forests, rivers, and plains. Every adaptation was a risk, every step onto land a gamble. Yet together they created the world we inhabit. Evolution thrives where boundaries are crossed. When we recall the rise of reptiles and the reign of dinosaurs, we see splendor. For millions of years they filled the world with size, strength, and variety. They remind us that dominance is not permanence, and that even the greatest forms can vanish. But they also remind us of continuity. Birds in their flights and songs are living dinosaurs, proof that nothing is ever fully lost. When we recall the mammals' rise, we see resilience. For so long, mammals lived in shadows, small and nocturnal, but they endured, waiting for their chance. When the asteroid struck, they survived, diversified, and grew. They became whales in seas, bats in skies, elephants on land, primates in trees. They show us that modest beginnings can lead to astonishing futures. When we trace the emergence of humans, we see possibility. Upright posture, tool use, language, art. These arose not all at once, but step by step, trait by trait. We are the product of small changes compounded, of adaptations layered over time. Our cultures and technologies accelerate evolution, creating feedback loops unlike anything before. We are shaped by nature, yet also shapers of it. And when we look to today, we see responsibility. The Anthropocene is not only a geological mark, it is a mirror. It reflects our power to harm and to heal, to diminish and to restore. We are the first species to know the story of evolution, and perhaps the only one in the universe able to tell it. That knowledge is not a crown, but a responsibility. To know the story is to accept the weight of choices, for we are participants in the next chapter. Evolution's story gives us 5 enduring lessons. Kinship, that all life is connected. Fragility, that species, even dominant ones, can vanish. Resilience, that life rebounds, finding new forms. Responsibility, that awareness demands action. And humility, that we are small, but not insignificant. These lessons do not end when the story ends, for the story does not end. They are carried forward in us. So, what comes next? The future is unwritten. Perhaps humans will spread beyond Earth, carrying seeds and genes to other worlds. Perhaps we will falter, leaving behind fossils and traces. Perhaps new species will rise from rats, crows, or microbes, shaping futures beyond our imagining. Evolution will continue, as it always has, not with destiny, but with possibility. And in that possibility lies wonder. To know that we are the products of chance and necessity, of survival and adaptation, is to know that our existence is precious. To live is to be improbable, and to reflect is to be extraordinary. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought is part of a chain billions of years long. To recognize this is to see meaning not outside of life, but within it. As we close this journey through evolution, remember that it is not an ending but a perspective. The earth is alive with stories, in fossils, in forests, in genes, in oceans. To walk outside and see a bird, a tree, a flower, a cloud, is to see echoes of deep time. We are surrounded by reminders that life endures, adapts, and surprises. Evolution is not only a past to study, but a present to cherish and a future to protect. If this exploration has moved you, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. What moment in this vast saga resonated most with you? Was it the first stirrings of life, the age of dinosaurs, the rise of mammals, or the emergence of humanity? And what other mysteries of science would you like us to explore in future journeys? Your curiosity guides what comes next. And if you want to continue with us as we dive deeper into the wonders of the universe, from the depths of oceans to the edge of galaxies, don't forget to subscribe. Together, we will keep uncovering the hidden stories of nature, told in calm reflection across time and space. The story of evolution is not finished. It never is. And as long as life endures, the story will go on.